Good evening, everyone. You're attending the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, a special meeting. Today is June 4th, 2025. It's 6:30 p.m. and the meeting is being held at the second floor meeting room at 14 Court Square in Greenfield. Chair statement. This meeting is being recorded by the Zoning Board of Appeals. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. Anyone else recording? Okay, thank you. Note that the Greenfield recorder is recording. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 20, subsection G, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting of a public body. If after clear warning from the chair, a person continues to disrupt the proceedings, the chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting. And if the person still does not withdraw, the chair may authorize a constable or other officer to remove the person from the meeting. Not worried about anybody. That's the general statement from the chair at every meeting. So I'd like a roll call of members for the record, just who's here tonight. I'll start. David Singer.
Peter Wozniak.
Debbie Jones.
Jim Nguyen.
Mark Maloney.
Charles Roberts. Eric Green.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clerk, we have the continuation of two public hearings. Can you please read both of them into the record and we'll open them at this time?
This is a continuation from the meeting on May 27, 2025. Application of Viridian Wireless LLC for property located at 0 Fairview Street West, Assessor's Tax Map R24 Lot 7A, which is located in the General Commercial GC zoning district for a variance pursuant to sections 200-8.7 of the zoning ordinance in order to allow the construction of a new wireless communication structure comprised of ground-based equipment cabinets and antennas mounted on top of a monopole 170 feet in height with insufficient fall zone. Again, continuation from the meeting of May 27, 2025, application of Viridian Wireless LLC for a property located at 0 Fairview Street West, Assessor's Map R24 Lot 7A, which is located in the General Commercial GC zoning district for a special permit pursuant to sections 200-4.9C, 200-7.14, 200-8.3, and 200-8.4. The zoning ordinance in order to allow the construction of new communication structures comprised of ground-based equipment cabinets, antennas mounted on top of a monopole measuring 170 feet in height at this location.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Sitting on the panel tonight are
Peter Wozniak.
Debbie Jones.
Jim Nguyen. Mark Maloney.
David's. No, sorry. You may be needed and you may be needed, and David Singer. Thank you. Okay. So to get into the meeting, first of all, I want to welcome everyone. This is planned to be the last night of any presentations, any discussions, and the board intends to close all the hearings tonight when the meeting is over before we do some other business. And then we will begin deliberations on June 18th here at 6:30 p.m. If people have, Ilana, is she here?
Yep.
If people have things that they want to give to the board tonight, please give them to Eric and make sure that there's a copy for people on the other group. So if it's from the concerned citizens, please have copies for the applicants. When you give us stuff, please, I hope you have copies for the concerned citizens so that everybody is seeing the same thing as we are. There was a request by the applicant whether or not the applicant has a person online. His name is Don Hayes. And I guess he is here. Thank you. I see your name up there, Don. Welcome to the meeting. He is here for a very narrow purpose. I feel that he's being represented as an expert on the issues surrounding the radiation from the tower. Dr. Chamberlain testified to his thoughts on that, and the applicant has Mr. Hayes here, or is it a doctor? Am I saying, is Mr. satisfactory?
Mr. Hayes is fine.
Okay.
Or Don or Donald. Yes, that's fine.
Okay, Donald here, not for the purposes of making a presentation, but in the event that any of the board members have any questions. So I sent out an email and you've seen an email exchange regarding that. I'm grateful you're here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd
Right.
like to recognize Dr. Chamberlain. I see you there. Hello.
Thank you. Hello.
That's nice.
Well, I remember Dr. Chamberlain gave a presentation at a meeting we had with the Committee on Man and Radiation, or COMAR.
I'm glad you said that.
that.
So if there aren't any questions, then I'm going to, Don, you're welcome to stay, but I won't be calling upon you to say anything at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. I do want to apologize for the little sentence after my name that says NIR section. Because of this particular platform in Zoom, I wasn't able to change that, but that does stand for non-ionizing radiation section of the Health Physics Society that I'm the secretary of. So I appreciate the time, and thank you very much, and have a great night. And Ed, it's nice seeing you back there.
Okay, we're all set, board?
Yeah, I do not have.
No questions?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Chamberlain, you're welcome to stay, but again, I will not be calling upon you to make any more presentations. We're closing out the presentations, but thank you for everything that you've done so far.
You're welcome, but I thought that would have an opportunity to present and talk about coverage maps, computer models, etc.
If at the time that the concerned citizens feel that they need to make a rebuttal, for lack of a better term, if they would like you to speak to some of that on their behalf, that would be fine, but I don't have you scheduled as a separate independent presentation.
All right. Well,
I just want to say we do want him to present. And I provided maps to everyone. If he's not able to, then I will present on that information, which I'm prepared to do.
I mean, unless the rest of the board wants to form a different opinion. I feel like the last meeting, Dr. Chamberlain was invited. It was you folks who invited him, who kind of led the charge as to what he was going to speak to. And you asked him about specific things. And the meeting, that was his opportunity to speak.
Since the last meeting we had, there has been a significant amount of new data, new information, reports that have been submitted related to the propagation maps, et cetera. And it feels critical that we address this because there is a lot of confusion and we feel there's a lot of misrepresentation and we need to get at the facts.
Well, I understand that you feel that way, but is Dr. Chamberlain an engineer?
no, yes, I am.
Yes, this is
This
why.
is what I teach. I've taught for 40 years, the area of computer modeling, the development of coverage maps. So this is my area of expertise. I'm willing and ready to talk about it.
He never was able to finish his presentation last time.
That's not true. You all decided to go in the direction that you went.
I didn't ask for that. That was other citizens.
Well,
that
that's
I-
that's your side of the ledger. So, I will see about it. But first, we have a peer review engineer that's here and he has been scheduled to speak. So we're going to have him speak first and then we'll see. Okay? So if you wish to stick around, that's fine. We'll see. And if the board wishes to hear from Dr. Chamberlain, that's fine also. So I'm just saying though that from my point of view, I made it clear what the agenda for the meeting was, and I'm going to stick to it. So, okay, we have a peer review engineer here by the name of Michael Lawton. Michael, would you step forward?
Sure. Let me move some stuff out of the way.
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name is Michael Lawton. I'm working with a company called Isotrope. Isotrope is a company that's been in business for over 20 years, providing unbiased, objective advice to municipal boards on RF engineering and siting issues and that sort of thing. I personally worked in the wireless industry until November of 2023. Worked for carriers for over 35 years and have presented before boards and both on behalf of carriers, on behalf of concerned citizens, on all different sides of the equation. I'm also a ZBA member myself in my town. So I have a pretty unique perspective on both what you all need to look at as well as sort of I've reviewed the videos, the filings. There's a spectrum of information that's been provided here, everywhere from things that are definitely factual to a lot of things that may be more emotional than factual and more conjecture than factual. The idea of my report that I presented that I hope everybody's had a chance to read, and I've had follow-up conversations with a few of you to explain some of the things that are in the report. My idea or the point of the report is to try to explain a lot of what you've seen and a lot of what's been presented, and try to cut through some of the hyperbole and stick to the facts of what is actually engineering and what is good engineering.
So may I interject for a second? So just for those who are new to this zoning board process with the cell towers, at the last meeting, there was some suggestion that the board shouldn't rely upon the information from the engineers of the applicant because there was a feeling that that the information from the applicant was self-serving and there was there were other members, there were other people that spoke the last meeting that talked about things that seemed to put the board in some state of confusion about how to digest the information we were receiving. So as a result of that, Attorney Rosen offered to have us have a peer review engineer come on our behalf, and that's Michael Lawton is that person. And there was also a suggestion that there be drop call data provided to us because one of the members of the group that testified or presented last time said that was the key information. We did not get that information from the applicant, but we got, what is it called? The drive data. Drive data. So we have drive data. We have the information that was originally presented to us. And what we've asked Michael Lawton to do is explain to us whether this information can be relied upon by us and to what extent. So that's what the report I think lays out, but I'd like you to say it.
Sure, yeah.
Too.
And I'm not going to go through and read the whole report because I think that's unnecessary. Everybody's seen it. I'll just go, highlight some of the important points, based on both working as a consultant, as an engineer for carriers, as well as being in front of boards, being part of boards for quite a number of years, and how wireless applications are reviewed and decided upon. And the first point in the report is about RF safety and EME. I'm not a safety engineer. We have two of them on here, but in my experience and in prior permitting, whether it's planning board, whether it's zoning board, whether it's Connecticut Siting Council, whatever the entity is, the effects of health and safety, while concerning to people, are not part of the decision-making process for a board. The FCC requires the applicants or the carriers to demonstrate that they're compliant with the rules. And if they've made that demonstration, that's all that can be asked of them. And that can't be part of a decision-making process. It can't be part of anything that is considered as you make your decision. So
There is one thing, though, that we have the right to do, just so it's clear. We have the right to condition this project so that the tower follows what the FCC's requirements are. Is that correct?
absolutely.
Have you
So
had any opportunity to review their information in that regard?
yes, so what you have in the package, I couldn't find it actually. Attorney Perry sent it to me, but what you have in the application documentation is an EME safety report that was done by C Squared on this tower, demonstrating, and I don't have it in front of me, but that the overall exposure levels done in accordance with the FCC calculations, I think were less than 10% of the public safety limit. And with that as AT&T's application now, should this tower actually be built, and should another carrier come along, it's the town's responsibility and prerogative to see another one of those reports that would show the aggregate exposure for,
Or adding on another.
or if it's AT&T who starts and the tower is built and AT&T is at the top, if Verizon or T-Mobile wishes to add their antennas on, there should be another report done that shows the aggregate of both of the carriers, or the three of the carriers, or four. And that's important as part of the process, because typically another carrier would just come in for a building permit. And your building commissioner or building inspector isn't going to know to ask for that. So the second point that I talked about were the plots, and the plots that you guys have all seen. These are not the drive data. I'll get to that in a second, but the sort of the blobs, and I see a bunch of them on here. Those are, in my view, something that an RF engineer, not in my view, in my experience, something that an RF engineer looks at every day and within a carrier's organization. In a previous engagement, I worked for a company who was responsible for tuning the propagation models for T-Mobile nationally. And the way we did it was, there's a generalized propagation model that's developed by a commercial entity that sells their tools. And those propagation models are then tuned for the local geography. The way we did it for T-Mobile, we collected 8 sites worth of drive data in any area that we wish to tune. And the data set from 6 of those sites was used to tweak and tune the model to be more accurate. And then the last 2 sites were used as a control, as to make sure, to validate that the model was in fact accurate. And the reason that's important is because what C Squared has done on behalf of AT&T here is collected drive data, which we can look at and compare to the propagation model, which I did in my analysis. And it looks quite remarkably accurate. The areas where there are blue in the plot, which is included in my report, seem like they match up quite well with the areas that are white on the blob plot, which indicate no coverage in the drive test and no coverage on the prediction. So in my view, and if I was an engineer at a carrier and I looked at these plots and I looked at that analysis, I would say this propagation analysis is valid, and I would use it. I would consider it valid to make decisions in the local area, in the greenfield area, whether it's looking at potential new sites, whether it's looking at coverage. Now, is this an absolute? Is it the case where if you drive down a road that's under color and you drive into a place where it's white, you immediately won't be able to make a call or surf the internet? No, it's not absolute like that. But the representation that AT&T has made is that if you're in the area of white, you'll have inferior service. and the drive data bears that out. So that's my view of the propagation plots that you have here. I mean, they're not enough, no plot is ever perfect, but it's as accurate as it can be.
Can I ask a question, Michael?
Yes,
In the report, well, the inference is that the drive test is the gold standard for evaluating this. But in the report, you indicate drive-by testing and drop calls. It's not the only thing. There's stuff that goes inside the building, stuff that's outside of the drive.
correct.
How should that be added into our thought process? Because if we're only using drive-by data, that doesn't address the issue that you point out in the report about someone who's lost and really trying to
Right.
make a 911 call, or someone who's in a building in the center of Greenfield, which is part of your coverage.
Yeah, and I think that the drive data is very useful. It's very helpful, but you have to be careful because it only shows a small portion of where a user might go. As you say, and as I said in the report, indoors, a park where a car can't drive, or, a undeveloped lot. If somebody's in the undeveloped lot, that's valuable coverage, but you can't model that, or you can't collect that data with drive test. You have to, so you can't, I guess the point is, you can't have an absolutely all-encompassing drive test that you allow to, as a decision-making.
But we shouldn't discount that as an important issue.
But drive data is very useful.
No, I'm talking about the other issue that's not part of drive data.
Right. Oh, yeah. For example, in downtown Greenfield here, a drive car can't access any user. I mean, we're here in this building. He's got a phone, there's other phones, those are subject to attenuation from the building. And that's what a prediction like this is intended to simulate, where the drive data, the drive car would have driven by on the street and not be subject.
Comment about the DBA readings of -83 and
Yes, I was going to get to that, but yes, thank you. To explain DBM, and I tried to explain it in the text, but it was a little bit backwards, not backwards, but it's a hard concept to explain. Closer to 0 is stronger coverage. So a higher negative number, meaning -30, would be better than -40. -40 would be better than -50. So a higher negative number, even though it's a smaller number, is better coverage. So when you look at the two levels that AT&T has provided here, -83 and -93, -93 is a lower standard of coverage. -83 would include some, attenuation for going inside buildings, or being in a car, or being in a basement, or something like that.
Those numbers talk about signal strength.
They do, yes.
So if you start having those get higher, you're going to lose the ability for that signal to go to a receiver of that information.
Correct. Yeah. And that's the premise is, as you progress down through the levels and you get to the white area, if you were in a white area and you were indoors, you'd have a difficult time using your phone or your device or your computer or whatever you wanted to do. If you were in a area under one of the colors, and the colors changed in a few of the maps, but if you were in the area under one of the colors, you'd have a much better probability of being able to use, whether it's a voice or high-speed data or whatever you're trying to do with your device.
You have large volumes of cell phone traffic during the day. Does that reduce signal strength?
It does, in a way that it doesn't specifically. So there's the aggregate power of a radio transmitter, and as an engineer, you allocate that power to either your bearers, your users, or to the footprint of coverage. And so as more users, as more demand, as more maybe somebody streaming a football game or something, and they're demanding a higher bandwidth, more bandwidth, a higher volume of data into their phone, that can cause lack of resources for other users on that sector and that site.
So all of the traffic that's taking place right now in Greenfield is being handled by the existing cell towers.
Correct. For AT&T, yeah.
That's right.
And remember that that's the other thing that I probably should have, you know, to go way back to basics. There are 3 or 4 carriers operating in New England. There's AT&T, there's Verizon, there's T-Mobile, and there's Dish Wireless. I don't believe Dish Wireless covers Greenfield yet, but they're good. They also go by Boost Mobile now. So you have primarily 3 carriers here. Anything else like I'm a Spectrum customer, and Spectrum is reselling Verizon service. So there's 3 networks that are serving you. So this is what your application from AT&T is one of those networks. I believe the other 2 have sites on the roofs of 2 buildings a couple blocks from here.
So if this cell tower gets built at this location, it relieves traffic on some of the other towers and provides
Correct.
overall better coverage for the area.
Correct. Improvement of better coverage in building particularly, but also better coverage and better capacity handling. Those would be the values, I think. And AT&T's engineers, you know, I think they can also describe that as well. But yeah, I mean, looking at this, I see value to the site. And as I said in my report, you know, it's up to the board to determine whether that value is significant or not. You know, I can show you where the gaps are, but are they significant? That's not an engineering question. That's a board question.
Thank you.
So those are the plots. Now, one of the things that I think is important being on a zoning board is to sort of look at things from the top down and determine if any application, whether it's for wireless or for a 40B or for a home that wants to add a accessory apartment or anything, is to look at the zones and look at, you know, where something is more favorably permitted versus less favorably permitted. So that's what I went through. And there are 3 or 4 different categories in your code of types of zoning, and the categories that
The
are
preferred sites.
preferred types. And I highlighted a few of the locations that were of more preferred type than the location of the application. The applicant came back and responded to those and gave an explanation as to why those other higher priority zoning map types were not feasible or not useful for them for this application. And, you know, based on that analysis, it does appear that, you know, from a zoning categorization perspective, this site is well suited. I also drove out there today, and I looked around, and it does seem to be a pretty wooded parcel. And from a visibility perspective, at least close in, it seems like it's also well suited. And then the last thing I reviewed was the height analysis. And basically that's the plots were provided that show the value of the height of the site. And the bands were 95, I believe 95, 115, 135, and up to the total overall height.
170 is the.
Yeah, up to 166. And it did look like there was kind of a break point where at 95 feet, the site is pretty ineffective. And once you go above that to the next height, the site is somewhat effective. And of course, as you go higher, that coverage footprint expands and the value of the site to more distant locations expands. So that's sort of me walking through the report. And then I concluded the report with sort of as a zoning board member, sort of the way I would look at this in terms of the decisions that, whether it's RF related or legal related, the decisions that you need to make, and hopefully that helps sort of frame some deliberation and discussion about, what you have, the application you have in front of you. And, I'm available to answer questions if anybody has any questions. Happy to help.
No, I just had a comment. I really appreciate this report and the time that you took in putting it together. It was very clear, very logical to follow. It really helped break down all the information we've been given. So
Thank you.
for that.
Thanks.
No, but thank you for asking me. Go ahead. So, again, just for people who are either just first time in or just to broaden some of the discussion. So this is AT&T coming to us and telling us what their coverage is like. And these maps show us what their coverage is like and what the gaps in their coverage is like, correct?
Yes.
This isn't a map of the gap in coverage in all of the Greenfield area in relation to all three of the providers.
No, I think if you had a Verizon phone or my phone, which is on Charter Spectrum, my experience would be very different in Greenfield. There'd be areas where it'd be better. There'd be areas where it'd be worse. But it's a different network, and they're not interoperating.
Right, but the point is that this is AT&T coming in saying, this is what we need for us. This is our gaps.
Yes.
This is how our coverage will materially increase. And in fact, in the center of town, there are antennas for Verizon and T-Mobile. And we could speculate that if we took a map, if we saw a map of downtown with those providers, maybe the strength of the signal might be different.
Yes, it would be better. I mean, I think you'd find, again, with my Spectrum / Verizon phone, my coverage as I parked across the street and walked in here, it was, very strong.
Okay. And again, I'm sure the board has gone cross-eyed comparing the map before and the map after and the map before and the map after and the colors and the different colors, the red and whatever. So I want to know if I've looked at the comparison correctly, and I'd like others to ask if they need help with that as well. But it seems to me that the increase in coverage is clearly around the rotary between Route 2 and 91. And then some of Greenfield neighborhoods that are parallel to 91 going north and going south on the east side especially will benefit from AT&T providing that coverage. Munson Street, though, it doesn't have good AT&T coverage and will not have good AT&T coverage, better AT&T coverage with this based on the map. And then if we go into the eastern part of Greenfield, downtown, and to this side of town where it's more densely populated around here, there really is not a significant.
It's not as valuable.
The change is
Yeah.
not as significant if there's any change at all, correct?
That's correct.
So most of the significant change happens around the rotary.
The rotary.
And then west of the
2A,
rotary,
yeah.
right, well, that's actually Route 2, but going
Two-
2A into
2
the
and
city,
2A, yeah.
right, okay, but that's the area that is going to be impacted the most in a positive way.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions from,
I have one more question. If this is the service without the cell tower is what they're providing for the community right now.
That's, yes.
If the cell tower gets installed, does it provide better quality, better service to the area we're talking about? So by layering this on, it reduces some of increases the quality of the service responses. Because one of the things that AT&T provides is service for FirstNet, I guess, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And so if this gets improved, right now, this is what they have. If power gets put in, it improves that service, and everyone else benefits from it. But that really is the intent
Well, everyone else who is a customer
of AT&T.
of AT&T
Yes.
or FirstNet that would be on that network, yes. It does, unless Verizon or T-Mobile chose to attach to the tower in the future.
Oh, yeah, but I'm just,
Yeah.
right now, I'm trying to understand, the cell tower is going up for AT&T to improve service over what is presently in operation.
Correct. Yes.
So by putting that in, that fills in the gaps, that provides additional quality and additional signal strength to the people who are using that.
Yeah, and if you look in the report, I snipped out I see you have this, which is the before. I snipped out the after also, and it's in my report, and you can kind of flip back and forth between the before and after and see, what the difference it will be.
If we don't do this, is what we have.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Thank you again for your presentation and for the analysis of this data. It's been very helpful. The board formally requested drop call data, which we have been told would be gold standard for evaluating the significance of this project. We did not receive that data. And I would like you to comment on how that would have helped us to make a decision about the level of service that is available now and whether there's a significant gap or not.
Drop call data, I mean, as a carrier engineer, drop call data is, or let's say 10 years ago was, very useful tool in your toolbox to determine whether coverage existed or not. As the technology has evolved, drop call data is becoming less and less meaningful and less useful because, and I tried to explain it in my report, but it's really difficult to sort of explain to, I would say, a non-engineer, in that it's the way cell phones used to work a long time ago. You had a constant communication between your phone and the site, and they were always connected. And when you were on the phone and you were talking, your phone was transmitting and the site was transmitting to you constantly, back and forth, two links in constant connection. So it was analog radio. And so a drop call would end that, right? So that was the metric that we had to look at when things weren't working the way they're supposed to. Pretty abrupt, you dropped your call. Now everything is digital. And what's happening is your phone and the tower or the site, the antenna, are transmitting back and forth, but not constantly. It's what's called in engineering terms, it's packet switch data rather than circuit switch data. So packets of information are being transmitted so that the site would transmit a burst of data to you. If you're using your phone, it transmits a burst of data to you. You transmit, your phone unpacks that, is the best way to describe it, and transmits a burst of data back to the site, which unpacks that. And then when it's unpacked, that's what recreates your voice on the other end. So that's similar to data traffic. That's similar to if you're sending an email, right? Because if you send an email, you're not constantly sending the email. You're sending the email and it blasts to the site. And then maybe you get a response from your email server that comes back to your device, and you'll get a burst of communication back. That's all by way of saying that a drop call doesn't necessarily indicate anymore that there's a problem. The carriers have much more sophisticated ways to determine that there's a problem in the connection. The idea that the drop call data is a gold standard, that was probably valid 15 to 20 years ago. It's no longer valid. And so a carrier today will look at things like with what type of coding. There's a whole coding chain of different ways to sample and compress your voice into that packet. And a carrier today will look at which one of those coding schemes is being used as indicative of the quality of the radio connection. So, and that's all data that exists that the carriers have, but it's not really drop call data. And that's what they're going to use. They also are able to look at, and way back in 20, 25, 30 years ago, we couldn't look at where users were when they were using their phones. We had to guess. We would say, okay, well, there's a college, that's probably where they are. Or if it's I-91, that's probably where they are. Now, the carriers can look at where the users actually are and determine by that where they need to improve coverage, where people are using their phones. Maybe there's a community gathering area or a restaurant where, well, people use their phones a lot. I'm not saying that's a great idea, but the carriers would know that, and they would know that they need to improve coverage in that particular area because they've got a lot of their customers that want to use that. So that's my way of saying that drop call data is useful, and it can be useful, but it's not as useful as it used to be. And if you have it, it can be one tool in the toolbox, but I'm going to always index to a propagation plot once I know that that propagation plot is valid and accurate to the measurements, to some level of measurements that have been taken in the local area.
Was the drive test data accurate?
Yes, yeah, that the drive test data would correlate. That's the point of it to me. I didn't look individually at each spot on each road and say, okay, well, is there coverage here? The point of the drive test is to validate the predictions, the blobs that you guys
That were
are
given
looking
to
at.
us by
Yeah.
AT&T.
What about MAP is the predicted coverage once the cell tower is up? How is that propagated if it's theoretic?
It's the same thing. I mean, what basically what these tools do, there's input data, which is the height of the antennas, the type of antennas, the orientation of the antennas, the power levels of the radios that are connected to the antennas, all the gains and losses in the radio chain from the transmitter, if it's at the bottom or if it's at the top. And then additionally, there's a terrain database, which represents the hills. And then there's typically a morphology database, which will represent whether it's a road or whether it's a treed area or whether there's homes there or whether there's, a dense urban area or a medium urban area. There's a bunch of categories of that morphology data. And all that is used by the tool to develop a prediction plot. And the prediction plot that you see, that these blotches, that's all done based on all that input data to create a simulation of what the coverage is. And the simulation, the same process is done for things that exist and for things that don't exist.
So if the drive test confirms the existing conditions, we can infer that the predicted
Correct.
is fairly accurate for this. based
Correct,
on
yeah. I mean, as an engineer, you want to say, the first question is my prediction model accurate in this environment, in Greenfield or in Western Massachusetts or in, whatever you're responsible for? Is my prediction model accurate? If my prediction model is accurate, then I can rely on it to do what ifs. What if I built a site here at 170 feet, 166? What if I built a site over there at 120 feet? What if I built a site here? You know, what if I put antennas on the roof of one of these buildings? That the carrier has no way of knowing exactly what that will cover specifically until there is a way, but it's labor intensive. But they can use the prediction tool to show what that site should cover based on the same process of analysis that you've used to show what you currently are covering. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Anybody else? We're good. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for everything. Maybe stick around for.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not leaving.
All right, so I want to talk, Dr. Chamberlain, you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Hi.
I first want to say I didn't mean any disrespect to you before. I was taken by surprise by the request. And my question to you, however dumb it sounded, was because I thought I guess I didn't really think about it, but I thought your expertise was more in the area of the health-related field because of the radioactivity, and maybe you had a PhD in structural things, but I didn't realize that you were also an engineer. And if you are, then my question to you is, do you believe you have the expertise to comment upon what Michael Lawton just said?
Absolutely, I do. And
Okay, and if you do, I want to give you a brief opportunity to respond.
let me make it brief. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Lawton for his presentation. I think it was very clear, covered and answered many of the questions that I had about the report. The only places where he and I disagree is, one, the value of dropped call logs. I've seen them for other sites, and they're very convincing. You see that people go into a certain area and all of a sudden the call disappears. And I've had it happen to me, and I'm sure it's happened to you when you've taken road trips. You go into a valley and the signal drops out, and that is what goes into a drop call log. So if there is a place where you can't send or receive a call, or if you have your call is interrupted, it is logged. And that is very valuable in proving that you have a problem. The other thing is I'm hearing from people in the area. They are telling me that they're able to go into the areas that are declared as being gap areas, and they're able to place calls, download videos, and all that. So that causes me to question how the results of the maps are interpreted. So those are two things that raise red flags for me in terms of justifying a new tower. And I'd like to go over some data, starting off with what was presented in the report. And so I'm assuming that you can see the report right now. The page from the report. Do you see the map?
Yeah, you're talking about Michael's report?
Yes.
Yeah, we all have it in front of us.
Oh, no, but I'm clicking on it. There it goes.
Oh, you're going to show us? Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to show it. It might as well have it up. So there are areas here that are marked in white that indicate. Now, I understand in the report that it says now that even if you're in some of the white areas, well, you can still make a phone call, which to me means there's no gap in that area. And I've worked with siting around the country. And so in most of the places I've dealt with, most of the communities I've worked with, if you're able to place a phone call, well, it means that you aren't in a gap area. So like I say, with Mr. Lawton's presentation, it's maybe our definition of what constitutes a gap area. So that's something else. As I get the reports from the community members, I look at the absence of a dropped call log. And then the third piece of evidence, which I want you to consider, is that if you look at what AT&T reports to the FCC, and I'll explain what this plot is. This is called as you can see, the FCC broadband map. This is what they report, that AT&T reports, and it's unlawful to misreport information, but this is what they're reporting to the FCC as coverage. So in a case where they're asking for a tower, they want to show as much gap area as possible. When they're reporting to the FCC, they want to show as much coverage as possible. And so when you overlay the two maps, you say, well, gosh, we're places that are showing up as being gaps in what is being submitted to you, the zoning board, isn't showing up on what they're presenting to the FCC. So that is a place of major disagreement. And so my conclusion, based upon what I'm seeing, is that there is no real justification for a new tower, or it doesn't have to be a macro tower. There are other ways of working with this. For example, you're reporting lack of coverage around in a certain area in your town. You can put up smaller, lower power antennas to cover those maybe very important areas without putting up a new and very tall, invasive tower. So I'm wondering if that is something that is being considered, because I don't see it in any report saying, oh, we're looking at another alternative that is not a macro tower.
Okay. Is that, okay, are you finished?
No, that I said I'd keep it brief.
Very good, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I have a couple of questions. You say you've spoken to people in the area. Are they all on AT&T that you've spoken to? Or are they on some other carrier?
They are on AT&T. And you might recall that the map I showed is for AT&T. I was able to click, in fact, I can show it again. And you can look at this
You can
map
put that
too.
map up again. I have another question on the map.
Okay, here we go. And I'm assuming you're looking at it right now.
Yes, thank you. So on this map here, if I'm reading the map correctly, it says percentage of areas serviced. And to my eyes, I mean, everyone's printers, everyone's screen's a little different. It looks like it's saying for this area, it only has 40 to 60% of coverage, not that the coverage is 100%. So I can understand how I would say this map is valid in this area. 40 to 60 or 20 to 40, depending on what color scheme.
Oh, okay. And actually, maybe I should. Oh, I'm
Our
sorry.
people are serviced, and not that everyone who's in there is serviced.
Actually, I'm looking at the scale down here, and it says for this color coding is associated with 80 to 100% coverage. And if you were looking at the lesser, it would be 40 to 60. But in this area, and I encourage you to go to the map. It's easy to find. And it is just FCC broadband map. You can, when you put your cursor on these pentangles, they give you the percentage. And so in these, for all of these, it shows up as 80 to 100%. So what's being reported by AT&T to the FCC is that we've got coverage in this area. It's not a gap area.
Okay.
And
Thank
so,
you.
as I mentioned, this is my concerns with Mr. Not concerns, but questions I might have for him is what's considered, how do you interpret the data you get? So if you are requiring, and this is something that I've done a good bit of work in also, in building reception, that's a whole new ball of wax, so to speak. Some buildings, like a wooden structure, signals go right into. But if you go into others, they are blocked. The signals are blocked by steel, for example. So if you have a steel reinforced building with low E glass and metal roof, you could have a tower right next to it and you're not going to get reception. And I've experienced that. And so to claim or to say that you want to have or require that you have in-building coverage is just fallacious. It doesn't work out. You're not going to get that. And then there's another question I wanted to ask Mr. Lawton, and that is, in making the drive test, where was the antenna? And maybe he could say a little bit more about the equipment he used, because that's very important. If you're in a vehicle with low E glass and you roll up the windows, your signal pretty much goes away because you're somewhat in what's called a Faraday shield that blocks electromagnetic fields. So how you perform those tests is very important.
You answer that question?
Yeah,
I'd like to hear, yeah.
well, I can't directly answer it because I didn't perform the drive test. AT&T's engineers performed the drive test. So I don't, and I did ask that question and I do have the answer in my email, but I don't recall what it was. Do you want to answer? is,
Please. Please introduce yourself, please. And welcome.
Martin Lavin, C Squared Systems on behalf of AT&T. The test was done with a Unity gain antenna on the roof of the vehicle. The data was collected by a calibrated scanner inside the vehicle.
Excellent. What was the brand of that scanner, please?
PCTEL.
Okay, great, great. Well, I'm glad you were here to answer that question because that is oftentimes a concern. And what you just said is allays those concerns.
Thank you. Michael, can you help? It's like these musical chairs, I'm sorry to say.
yeah, it's okay.
Getting your
Can you
exercise.
help us? I don't want us to be the dueling engineers, but I want to whittle it down if I can. So the FCC maps, can you help us understand what they mean and,
Yeah,
Can I also add one point? Can you throw the maps back on the screen?
Oh, I sure will. And I'll be able to flip back and forth.
you want both maps?
Uh,
You want his,
Either one is fine.
okay. But I'd like him to answer the question.
I just want to point out something before he's asking the question.
Okay.
I want to point out,
I have it just,
the top right corner of the map.
Oh, you want to go to the other map?
No, this one's fine, the top
Okay.
right corner. You can
Yes.
see there's a choice of either, and you have the printed ones in front of you. Yep. Either outdoor stationary or in-vehicle mobile. I just
Right.
want, before any questions are asked and anyone gives any credibility to the maps, these are outdoor stationary. So
Right.
somebody's standing in their yard and this is what, again, presuming these maps are even accurate, it's an outdoor stationary map. And I just want to make sure that that's clear. I wanted to make sure that Mr. Lawton sees that before.
And that's different than the drive
Of
test.
course it is, because that's
Just
on
the
the
drive-
drive of a vehicle and the vehicle is moving.
Okay, so
That's
that
also different than why it's negative 83 dB and negative 93 dB, because those are standards that regulate in building, in vehicle coverage, not outdoor in the middle of a field, standing there in the wide open field,
Okay,
not moving while you're on the phone.
okay, thank you for the clarification.
as far as the FCC maps, or I would include in the analysis or the description of this, there's also, if you go onto AT&T's website, you'll find that they have a map that will probably tell you the same thing. There's great coverage in Greenfield. Everybody should sign up. Everybody should buy an AT&T phone. This comes, these maps are produced and put to national entities for a reason, and they come up quite often in zoning hearings like this, often by this similar people. And most of the boards that I've talked to, worked with, discussed, basically, and I believe there's law around this as well. Not a lawyer, but these national showings of coverage are not considered accurate, and are not valid for any kind of siting level determination.
Well, but also these are reported, the data reported on these maps are provided by, in this case, AT&T. Notice that AT&T is selected, and so what's in the purple pentagons is AT&T reported data. So I'm being told just the opposite, that these are a gold standard. So for me,
Okay,
I can't agree with that.
okay.
okay,
I
we're
would
allowed to disagree.
I- suggest that since we have different opinions, that we heard from both of you, they're both experts, and that which way it goes is going to be up for the board to deliberate
That's
when we
right.
have our opportunity.
That's what I was saying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's
so my final thing is that with no dropped call log, with reports of coverage by people in the community, by the map that we're looking at right now, I don't believe that there's sufficient justification for a new tower. And that's where I'll leave my comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend our meeting. Really appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Oh, hold on, you have a.
Yeah, I have a
Dr.
question.
Chamberlain, come back, please.
Dr. Chamberlain, are you qualified to comment on the safety of a collapsing tower that has been proposed for this site?
Not really. I've heard the arguments, and this is are you talking about the one that collapses?
Yes.
That folds rather than collapses right over?
Folds, yes.
Yeah, I've heard the arguments and I'm not qualified to really comment
Okay.
on it, so perhaps
Thank
I
you.
shouldn't.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mike Lawton, are you qualified to?
I am not a structural engineer. I have seen analyses like that in the past, and I know that if you look at various town codes, the fall zone that's required here is among the higher 100% and plus. There are some that are more than 100%, but there are also some that are 20 to 30% of the tower height because of that very thing. And that's in various jurisdictions. That's what I've seen. I'm not a structural engineer, so I don't know how the towers are designed to do whatever they're doing, or whether there's any situations where it's actually happened.
We also had a peer review of the tower, for that purpose. So if we
Right.
wanted to go back to.
Yeah,
the
I just
engineering
thought
curve.
perhaps
Yeah.
there was some
No,
expertise.
good question.
Mr. Chair, also,
Yes, sir.
we do have our structural engineer. If anybody on the board has any questions, Dominic Aversa is also present, so that if anyone has any questions this evening as to the structural
Okay, great,
characteristics. he
great.
just want to
Okay.
let-
Thank you.
Maybe not this second, but yes, thanks for letting us know that. Any other questions of Michael at this point?
Thank you.
Can I go away again?
You can go away. Thank you. You never know. Does the board want to continue, break? What do you want to do?
I'm good right now. I don't know about if these guys need a break.
A little longer? Okay,
I think somebody was trying to get your attention. I don't know if you're recognizing it.
yes. Well, the problem I'm having is that at this point, I want to have this be an organized meeting around people speaking from the public versus the applicant speaking. So is it something related to kind of summing up how you feel about the tower? Is it something that's relevant to right now?
What was shown on the screen that the gentleman here commented on.
Right, but from where would you be coming? You're not
What was being said.
but I know, but you're not an expert really, are you?
No, I just.
I'll give you a chance, but it won't be right now. There'll be a time
Okay.
later when you can give your rebuttal and I'll be happy to hear from you. So is that okay? Okay, thank you. Yes, same thing, so.
So Andrew Vernon, Sunset Square.
No, Steve, thank you for coming. Yep.
Community college. So I find it almost surprising because I am an AT&T user.
All right, I'm sorry to cut you off. There'll be a time for rebuttal. We're gonna go in sequence. We have to. This is the only way we could do it. And I'm happy to hear from people too. Don't get me wrong.
I
Yes,
guess what I'd like to suggest is close out their presentation,
Absolutely.
open it up. But I
Yes.
think if we do this, it just.
I agree with you.
Totally muddies the.
So you hear we're saying it sequentially is what we want to do. This is how we planned it. Whether
Yep.
you agree with us or not, please respect our position on that. Okay. So Michael and Ned, it's your turn to sum up and if you want to rebut anything and.
Take up the space.
Let me grab this one. Okay, so I think what I'd like to do is to follow up on Mr. Lawton and I'm sorry, Dr. Chamberlain, since AT&T is really looking to address their coverage, and that's what you just heard. What I'd like to do is give the floor to my colleague, let him address coverage concerns so that it consistently flows with the discussion that was just had. And then I'll provide Verity's kind of final analysis and presentation, if that would be
That's
good
fine.
with the board. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Ed Parry from Brown Running again. I don't know why everybody says that I'm not an attorney, but. So first of all, let me since it's on the top of my list, and Dr. Chamberlain mentioned it, let me show you the map that I provided everyone. Now, at the last hearing, which I watched and listened to, Mr. Campanelli made some comments about these broadband maps being some kind of bait and switch that I did. And I'll tell you, I was pretty pissed off about that. There is no bait and switch. This is on the FCC website. I pointed out to Michael, as he pointed out to the board, that what I used was the environment of in-vehicle mobile. We acknowledge if you're standing outside, you're probably going to be able to make a call. And that's what the first FCC map says. This map, which you have in your packets, is the in-vehicle coverage. I pointed that out to the board, and I asked you to take a look at it, and you'll see that it kind of reflects exactly what our coverage maps look like. Why? Because our coverage maps are correct. Now, the one regret I have, and I put in my letter, was I wasn't here at the beginning, and I didn't know that you guys have never dealt with a tower under the ordinance. If that were the case, it probably would have been a little bit different approach, at least from my perspective on the coverage stuff, because it is confusing. And I've been doing it for 28 years, and I get confused by it. But we left this vacuum of information. That's AT&T, our presentation, that's on us. But we left this vacuum of information, and it got filled like they always do. They got filled with these crazy conspiracy things and this hyperbole. And I'll tell you, the comments that were made at the last hearing were insulting. Now, if you take a look, I provided Martin's resume. He's been doing this for 30 some odd years. He's an engineer. He's an electrical engineer. He's also has his MBA. And for somebody to say the coverage maps that we provided, I don't see him on the screen, were done with crayons by my 6-year-old. They're baseless, 90% false. But he said 90% false. Now, after listening to everything he had to say, and I'll be brief on this, but I'm flustered about it. Okay. After everything,
Get it out, get it out.
Thank you.
Make you feel better. Get it out.
I sat there on the video. I mean, as a fellow attorney, I apologize to Martin. That's horrible. Look, Alana may have her opinion on things. I don't disparage her. She has her opinions. That's what this is about. Present your opinions. We don't take knocks at anybody. But the idea that they would attack C-squared or an engineer, and I'll tell you, we offered to bring Don Hayes in, and the first email I saw, an attack on Don Hayes. It's like, I know you all saw it in the email. It's like, well, what's this about? Like, are they going to attack me next? I mean, they're doing their job. Don Hayes is in the industry. You get wireless experience by being in the industry. If you're a fireman, you put out fires. So the idea that we just take these attacks and things are just left, and I'm sure you're sitting there saying, all these maps are probably BS. But as I put I hope you all read my letter. I took a lot of time with it. Why would we build a site that we don't need? It doesn't make sense. I know people don't want it. They don't want to see the infrastructure. They don't want the health issue. That's what this is all about. So why would AT&T, and I told you that I just did one in Pittsfield. We're completing the build. We're investing over $1 million, like $1.2 million for all the costs. I put that in my letter. Why in God's name with a company, a public company, who, when I hear the comments, are just in this to make money, why would we spend $1.2 or $1.5 million to invest in something when our customers are already happy? They're not happy. If I knew you didn't have experience with a tower, maybe that's where you have a discussion about a peer review. That's where you do a drive test. But I got to tell you, the first time we had the request for the drive test was at that last hearing. So I sat there and watched. It was, I want to drop calls. You made the official, somebody made an official, pronouncement. We want the drive test done. We did a drive test. We don't come in here adversarial. We're looking to get your approval for something. We have to prove our case. But it takes time to develop this. So, unfortunately, we spun our wheels a little bit at the beginning. You had concerns. I'm sure you had questions like, why are they doing this? But it makes sense. I mean, why would we invest in something like this? But I'm going to get off my soapbox now. So right now you have our coverage maps. Drive tests are done to validate the coverage maps, as you heard. I do have Martin, who you heard briefly. He's here to answer any questions about any of the AT&T coverage maps, drive tests, how he puts things together. for AT&T. AT&T doesn't operate 1G, 2G, 3G. That's all been, I've listed all of this stuff in my last letter to you. We have 4G and 5G. There'll be 6G at some point. But it's not like we're connecting to the telephone service any longer. You're making your voice calls over voice over internet protocol or something else that I don't even know. I don't even know how it works and can't explain. But it's not like we're connecting to the old, Ma Bell and we're getting switched through the network. That's not how it works. So the idea that somebody comes to a hearing and just throws this stuff out there, it's not evidence, it's argument. You can argue against it. You can argue that it's ugly. You can argue that it doesn't belong there. But I have yet to hear an engineer say that we don't have a gap. Now that we've proved it up with the drive test, this drop call thing is just, frankly, a distraction. It's a silver rider. They won't give us the drive test. They know we won't give it to them. That's why they waved that little shiny object. AT&T, I've been doing AT&T for 20 years. Never given drop calls. Sorry, not drive tests. We do drive tests all the time. AT&T's made the corporate decision. Unless there's something that requires us to submit it, it's not getting submitted. And I think that going to the drive test is exactly the validation for the coverage maps. And you can see exactly where the gaps are. So a car drove around with an antenna, just like it would be a drop call, and said, where is their coverage and where is there not? And it validated the maps. The health report is the health report. We're at like 2.5% of the maximum. That's it. We've proved our case. Health is off the table. Emissions are off the table. I agree. If this co-location, they're additive. They have to, come to the city, prove their case that they still comply. All we have to do is comply, and we comply in a significant way. We always do because the tower is so high away from the ground that at 6 feet, you're just not getting enough power down there. Now, we provided a bunch of maps for the alternative sites. I don't want to go through all of them. I think it makes sense if there are questions for me, questions for Martin, we can answer them unless you want me to run through each of them. And, we provided, I don't blame you. I'd shake my head no too. But the bottom line is we have validated what we've been saying since the get-go. And all of our filings have been validated. They've been confirmed. You hired, we paid for Mr. Lawton to review it. He validates it. I don't care if somebody's outside with their cell phone and says, oh, well, I have good coverage. That's not the science. That's not the engineering. In building is significant. Now, if you look at all of the case law, at least in this circuit, in building is, where we're headed. Everybody wants their phones to work, whether it's, penetrating a brick building, why in God's name would you want to be inside your house? You don't have landlines. I've sent you statistics on all of the reports. 80% of people don't have landlines anymore, or 76, I think it was. So why would you want to be in a situation where when I go in my house, I can't use my phone, so I have to go outside? So we're trying to maximize coverage. And that's where you get this negative 83, negative 93. And I can't explain what it all means, but I know that if I'm outside a building and it's 93, and it's not penetrating the building, 83 is got a better chance of getting inside it. Lastly, FirstNet. So AT&T provides, we went through this ad nauseum. We provide FirstNet service for first responders. Your own fire chief came to a hearing and said he has issues with FirstNet. Frankly, I don't know what more you need when you got your fire chief saying we have issues with our FirstNet service. We've proved the gap. So the gap is a gap for FirstNet, a gap is a gap for the AT&T service. I know we have some people don't live in town that are objecting to it. Some people don't live near the tower. Some people can't see the tower. So we know where that's coming from. And in my opinion, that's a health related thing. And I don't think anybody hides that, but let's be clear about what the objections are. I didn't see the balloon test. You all saw it, whoever attended it. I'm told that it wasn't visible from a lot of areas. Now, as I said at the first hearing that I attended, the tower is not invisible. 170 feet, you're going to see it if you're standing next to it. You're going to see it. If you're far enough away that you can see it above the tree lines and have an angle, you're gonna see it. But you saw the, results of the balloon test, and you have a, good sense of, is this a good location? Is it the right location? Did we comply with your ordinance? So we can talk about all these gap things. Did we comply with your ordinance? That's what we come out. And I think that's what Michael's gonna deal with, and with that, I'm pontificating.
I just want to say one thing, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's kind of it's within the realm of the sensitivity piece, your emotional feeling. I'll tell you what it feels like for me. I'll speak for myself. This is not an indication of where I'm going to come out in the vote, but our job is to defend our community people. And Alana and her group have real concerns about health.
Yep.
The rules of the Federal Telecommunication Act, it's not a level playing field. You have a lot of power in this process. Good for you. And, that's the way it goes. That's the way this country works. But I'm not going to apologize for their disparaging you or AT&T, but I want you to know that you might want to take a minute and see what it feels like to be the person who's in the neighborhood worried about something being jammed down their throat. So I have a lot of respect for this group. I don't always agree with them, but I'm going to say a word for their benefit. So that's my response.
I think it was more for Chamberlain, not people living there. I get that. So,
but if you could just walk away with a little empathy,
I do
for them.
I do this all
that would make me feel better.
I will.
You want us to feel better that you were abused in some way. I'd like us to feel better that you understand that this is a community that these people have a right to their feelings.
I get it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a
Absolutely.
have a question before Michael gives his presentation? I spoke with Michael Locke and I asked him a question. With what we have now for service, is there a risk of poor service or reliability or whatever? And his indication to me was, yeah, possibly. It still might work, but, with the service we have now, it may not provide the quality of service we might have. So then I asked, if we add this, does this increase the reliability in, quality of service? And his indication was, yes, it will, but it may not be markedly different in certain circumstances. And in his report, he basically says he's defined that there is gap in coverage, there will be an improvement, but that doesn't necessarily, he's not in the business to make a statement about substantial service. Okay. So with that, Michael, if you could kind of address his report about him being an engineer and can't make a recommendation about whether there's a substantial lack of coverage.
Certainly. Okay. Let me do this, if I might. That is going to be part of my presentation this evening. So if it's okay with you, I can either jump to that first or I can take it up in the middle.
However you want. I just, at some point, I'd like you to, because I had that conversation and I ended up knowing technically everything was fine, confirmed. But in his report, as an engineer, I can't help you with making the decision whether the service is substantial or not.
So I'm going to make a presentation this evening. I made 7 copies of the presentation. I was thinking 1 would go to Eric, 1 would go to Elena, and 5 would go to the voting board members. But since there are actually 7 board members sitting at the table, I think that it should be circulated to the 7 at the table. And I can make sure that we get an extra copy to Eric and or Elena. In that, Eric, in there are thumb drives. So I want you to have those as well. So what I did is, and I'll explain the presentation in a minute, but to the extent that we reference additional documents that have been submitted over the course of the past 6 meetings, I put them all on a thumb drive for everybody. And my theory was that way everybody doesn't have to print a ton of stuff, carry a ton of stuff around. You have one document and you have everything that I have in front of me this evening. But to the extent that you want to take it home, look at it over the next 2 weeks before you come back and deliberate, I thought it would be easy to put it on a thumb drive for everybody rather than kill a tree and print out a whole bunch of these binders. But the memo I printed out so that if you want to have it in front of you this evening, you can. If you want to turn it upside down while I speak and just we can talk, that's fine as well. So with that, okay. So first of all, thank you. I do have to say, noting that the board has not had an application under this bylaw and that you only have one cell tower that was built before the bylaw, I appreciate everybody on the board. Your questions have been respectful. They have been thought out. They have been considerate. And knowing how many hearings I've done and knowing that Ed's done 10 times as many as I have, we do hear this a lot. So sometimes if we show some frustration, it's just because we do this over and over and over again. But I can't even begin to tell you how great the questions are that have come from the board. I'm also respectful of the neighbors. I think that in an ideal world, we could all pick and choose what's in our backyards. I think we want to be able to do that, and I think we pick locations to live based on what exists in our neighborhood today. And we don't necessarily think about what's going to be in our neighborhood in 20 years, nor do we necessarily have the right to control what's going to be in our neighborhood in 20 years. Massachusetts just passed a law that allows everybody to put a 900-foot house in their backyard. Part of the affordable housing initiative in this state. I don't know how I'll feel if my neighbor in my backyard goes and puts a second home in their backyard that is going to be effectively in my backyard. I'm very cognizant of that. I've been doing land use work for 30 years. I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chair, about we don't draft the laws. Our job is to go ahead and either apply for projects in accordance with the laws or oppose projects in accordance with the laws. And we live with the laws, whether we like them or not, whether it's cell towers, whether it's solar, whether it's cannabis, whether it's churches, any of the things that have certain exemptions and certain rights that are above and beyond local zoning. As I listened at the last meeting, what really I felt that I picked up on was that a lot of the discussion was really outside of your bylaw. Okay. And I wanted to start this meeting by discussing your bylaw and discussing the memo that I put together, because in the 2 weeks, no, in more than 2 weeks now, in the 6 weeks since the last meeting, I think it was April 17th, what I decided to do was take your bylaw and lay it out in a memo and take each section by section and answer it for you. Tell you what our contention is, tell you what our argument is, tell you what documentation we've submitted to you, and let you know what we think as to the opposition group. And I use opposition group just because their document is called the opposition memorandum. They titled it, I didn't. So I don't in any way mean it to be disrespectful. We use the title of their document. And I tried to put in what they put in. And so what I did is I created what I think is a roadmap. And in creating it, it helped me think a lot about the project that's here in front of you tonight and the application that we presented to you and whether or not we actually did or didn't do a good job. I'll give you an example. Earlier this evening, Dr. Chamberlain was speaking, and when he listed off his 3 or 4 points, one of them was, why don't we do smaller, lower towers, and we could do more of them? Your bylaw doesn't provide for that. Your bylaw requires anybody who is siting a wireless telecommunication facility to follow your bylaw. And your bylaw says, first thing you do is look to existing towers. If you can't go on an existing tower, the second thing you do is you look to build a tower that can accommodate all of the carriers. And I will tell you, at the time your bylaw was drafted, that was pretty much commonplace in the industry. That's where people were gravitating. I don't know whether you got the recommendation from the Mass Municipal Association. I don't know if you reached out to a law firm like the old Koppelman and Page, which is KP Law. I don't know who drafted them. There are tons of bylaws out there. And in my job, going community to community, I see similar language in many different communities because there are attorneys out there that represent municipalities. There's a group of attorneys, Jay Tallerman, Lisa Mead, Mark Bobrowski, who writes the handbook on land use law. KP Law. I've had hearings where Mark Bobrowski has represented the municipality and I've been representing the applicant. And Mark will say, yep, I drafted that bylaw. I drafted it 23 years ago, and about 45 or 50 communities took that bylaw that I drafted with regard to whatever it might be and incorporated it into that bylaw. So as an applicant, there is law that basically says an applicant has the right to rely on a bylaw and an ordinance when they submit an application and start putting time, energy, money, and resources into that application. We started with your bylaw, and I actually think in reflecting and in writing this memo, and I think, and I appreciate your comment in it, Mr. Lawton, that you think that we actually, do think we did a good job based upon what the bylaw says. Might we have presented something different if your bylaw allowed for different types of installation? Yeah, it's possible, but we always start with the bylaw. That's the first place we go, because when we go in front of a board and we want to advocate for a project, we have to look at that bylaw. And if we're worried about whether or not, if we lose, we could appeal that decision, we look to whether or not, if we had to go in front of a court, whether the judge would agree that we complied with your bylaw. So in looking at your bylaw, and I don't have to go through this whole thing tonight. I think you have most of the information. I don't feel compelled to sit here and keep everyone here till 9:30 or 10 o'clock and go through the memo point by point. I'll point out a few key principles that I see in the bylaw. One is that we have to follow it, and we have to start by looking at towers and then looking at districts and build to co-locate. And that's what we did. And we started with looking at towers. Then we looked at industrial sites, and then we looked at general business sites. Those all come before rural residential. And we found a general business site that we felt like comported with the bylaw. And we felt like it was an appropriate site based on as many of the factors that we thought were relevant. We've provided you information on why the existing towers in the community didn't work. Again, I believe Isotrope confirmed that. We provided you information as to why some of the general industrial sites, and really we focused on the ones on the southern part of like south of 91, not really southeast, there's some,
South of the Rotary.
But south of the Rotary. And I'm happy to go into any of them. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to allow you to read Ed's memo that he sent last week that went back to Isotrope and read the submission I sent you. But for various reasons that we've explained and provided documentation on, those sites didn't work. The next thing we look at is we have to build a tower where co-location is feasible. We have to do it. That's what your bylaw says. And the reason your bylaw says it is because if Verizon comes in next month, or T-Mobile comes in next month, or Dish Network comes in next month, the first thing you're going to say to them is, please go look at the AT&T tower. That's what your bylaw tells them to do. So if my friends at Prince Lobel, who represent T-Mobile OmniPoint, if Craig Tataronis or Ricardo Souza get a phone call, they're going to pick up the bylaw, they're going to read the bylaw, and the first thing they're going to say is co-location. And they're going to look and see if you've approved any towers recently, and they're going to say, oh, Ed and Michael had a tower. Let me call them and see what I should do. And they're going to call me, and I'm going to tell them, yeah, we have a tower, and we designed it for co-location. We designed it for 4 locations, and that dictates that it's got to be above the tree line. It dictates that there have to be significant room above the tree line for the trees to grow. That dictates that the carriers have to have some separation between them to avoid interference. And again, I would say if you need an expert to answer those questions for you this evening, Isotrope is here. Dan Martin is here, but I'm saying, I should have suggested a peer consultant 3 meetings ago. I suggested him at the last meeting. You guys went and engaged him and brought him in. And I would suggest that you ask the peer rather than our own expert, so that there's some independent confirmation of it. We then looked at all of the other factors. And I think the biggest thing that I want to take you to is variance. Okay. Massachusetts law, this is really important. You heard some suggestions about, from Attorney Campanelli at the last meeting back in April about cases in New York and New Jersey. And if we were having this hearing in New York and New Jersey, I might have a different response. But in Massachusetts, it's Massachusetts law that controls. In Massachusetts, it's Massachusetts State Court, it's Massachusetts District Court. And then a decision in the District Court can get appealed to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. First Circuit Court of Appeals controls, and those decisions can get appealed to the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court rendered a decision, a Supreme Court decision would control. But a Massachusetts case or a First Circuit case would have precedent in a case in Massachusetts over a case that is from New Jersey or New York or Montana or California or Florida or anywhere else. And the primary case in Massachusetts is Cranston, Rhode Island. It is a First Circuit Court of Appeals case, so that it encompasses Massachusetts. And it does, for the most part, follow decisions in Massachusetts, Lincoln, Sudbury, Wayland, cases that Ed and I did 20 years ago. And the Cranston case basically says, you think of like burdens and presumptions and shifting of burdens. So the burden falls on the applicant, and the applicant has to provide you actual evidence, not anecdotal evidence, but actual evidence. And we think we did that in our coverage maps, our propagation studies. We then supported that evidence eventually by bringing the peer consultant in, doing a drive test, and asking the peer consultant to review it. And we believe that that evidence supports AT&T's determination that they need neg 83, neg 93, and that based on their models and their propagation, they have a gap in coverage. If you look at the Cranston case, and my interpretation of the Cranston case is that we have met our burden of proof. And as a result of us meeting our burden of proof, the presumption now shifts. Now the presumption is that we do have a gap in coverage. We've provided hard, actual, factual evidence to the board. The board has to take that factual evidence into consideration when it makes its decision. Do they have to rely on it blindly? Nope. If you have any other factual evidence paired with respect to this case by experts with respect to this case, not a study from Brazil or a study from Florida or a judge's decision from New York or New Jersey, but if you have something else that's relevant in Massachusetts, in the First Circuit, that was prepared with respect to this case, tangential to this case, then that would constitute substantial evidence, not anecdotal evidence. And you could then take that into consideration because, again, there's a burden. We shifted that burden. It creates a rebuttable presumption, but a presumption nonetheless. And now you would need to look to actual evidence. I don't think there is any. And in the memo that I've submitted to you, I believe that the only actual factual evidence, substantial evidence that you've received in this case is the materials prepared at the request of our office, at the request of Ed's office, at the request of Ready, at the request of AT&T, and by the peer consultants. They are experts in their field who have looked at this site and this city and this community, and they have taken the information that has been provided to them, verified by them, confirmed for them, and come together, I think, with conclusions that with regard to fall zone, that the design of the tower is safe. With regard to coverage gap, that coverage gap does exist. With regard to improvements to that coverage gap by building this particular tower, that will take place. I think the factual elements of the case are laid out in the evidence, the actual factual evidence, and not the anecdotal evidence. I think the anecdotal evidence opens people's eyes up. It leads people to ask questions, potentially raise concerns. And I applaud the board for pushing us and telling us we want, more. We're not just going to rely on your first propagation maps. And you made us go out and do our homework. And we did a drive test. We agreed, again, at the end of the last meeting, sitting there watching, I observed, I I did everything I could to keep my mouth shut during the last meeting, other than when one person spoke and didn't identify themselves. And I listened, and at the end, I looked at my client and I said, I'm going to tell them we're going to offer a peer consultant. And I turned and I looked at this board and I addressed the chair and I said, go ahead and get a peer consultant. I don't want to, for lack of a better term, I don't want to lose. We spend time and money and effort and attention to this. We're contemplating investing well over $1 million in a particular project that obviously we wouldn't spend that money if we didn't believe that we had a need and that this community didn't have a need. And I believe that everything that's in here supports that application. I don't know if there's anything else. I don't want to go through this item by item, but I will tell you, I believe the variance standard in Massachusetts is clear. It's a gap in coverage justifies a variance. I believe the standard is clear in Massachusetts that the initial presumption, the initial burden falls on the applicant. I believe in Massachusetts and in the First Circuit, it is to the applicant's right and obligation to determine what their needs are, and then to set that out in models and factual supported engineering data and information. And I believe that that then shifts the burden and creates a presumption in favor of the applicant. And I think the applicant met it. I don't know if this.
Just to finish up my end of things, we're not interested in litigating. I mean, I don't litigate this case. I mean, when this leaves me, I'm done. I do land use. I don't like the litigation stuff. I like court stuff. We're not interested in that. We're interested in finding a way to provide AT&T service to an area that we have gaps in. Now, I did make Martin drive all the way down here. If there are questions about the gap that the board has for him, that it would be great to ask him. If there's any concerns about what we've provided or need specifics from Martin about any of the maps we provided, we put Martin through all of these, map requests. We're happy to rely on what we submitted, but if there are questions, if there's anything in your mind that either Mike Lawton didn't respond to, but that you want to hear from Martin on behalf of AT&T, he's right here, ask him. I mean, he's a great guy to deal with. Secondly, if there are any alternative sites that you're not satisfied with, that we need to have a further discussion about. We talked about closing the hearing at the beginning of this. We want to make sure all the issues are buttoned up though. So we've provided our analysis, we've provided our, substantial evidence on our gap, and that this is the site, this is the best site. But if there's any question in anybody's mind, we'd love to know what that is so that we don't sit here and run through every site. If there's something in particular, I'd love to get the feedback. I know, I'm sure, with the whole height issue and so forth. The idea is we're looking for some feedback. You've gotten reams of documentation. Michael's got an unbelievably substantial memo about how we meet the ordinance. We talk about all these cases of litigation. So we could talk about the cases. I think, ad nauseum, we're there.
Why don't you give us a chance?
Anybody have? And again, I just want to remind everybody that you have Dominic Aversa as well, if anyone has questions about the structure of the tower.
We probably do.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we go a couple of more minutes? All right. He's our barometer.
Yeah, that's
The old guy.
That's fine. I might sip my coffee while I'm waiting.
Are there any questions, any comments that anybody wants to make at this point?
I guess the only thing I like to revisit this. But after everything that came through, reading all the last documents, your document, I don't have any questions in regards to anything that we've been shown at this point. I feel satisfied that I understand where they're coming from at this point, why they, there's some doubts about why the sites were, chosen. Like, well, we decided they wasn't good. And I think they provide enough documentation for me to read through and understand all that. So I don't have any questions at this point. I was going with the peer review on the structural stuff. So this is the only thing that I might end up having some questions about later.
Yeah, I do want to raise one other. I cited cases in here. One of the reasons that I did is that I understand that you have a chair of your board. So the goal was not to give you case law and have everyone have their head spin and say just me. What is it is only intended for David's head to spin but on the theory that when you guys deliberate, he can say, I read this case, I read that case. So it is in no way intended to be, oh, this guy's trying to like over lawyer us with cases. The fact that you have David sitting here, you have your chairman sitting here, who is a learned real estate attorney and land use attorney, as well as the chairman of your board. I gave him the information so that to the extent that he wants to verify and confirm anything that I'm saying as a matter of law, based on my experiences, I include those so that it's not like, well, which case? Why didn't you tell us about that case? Why didn't you give us that case? So I just want to point out that I do cite them in here, but I'm doing it to make it easier for David to understand where we're coming from, so that when he does deliberate with this board, he'll be able to say, I read this case, I agree with Michael, or I don't agree with Michael. Ed cited some cases in his memo. David may say, I agree with Ed, or I don't agree with Ed. But I don't expect all of you to pull up the cases and read the cases, but they're there if anyone's bored and wants to.
I have some. Want me to zip it?
No, I'm zipping it right away. I'm not gonna add it right now.
Okay. So with that hat on, the lawyer hat, I guess. So I say all this with respect, but I am a lawyer, so I probably won't say, it won't sound respectful. You say that we have an ordinance and that you're complying with our ordinance. But from the first day that this application came in, the thing that bothered me personally was that we have a fall zone that's the height of the tower.
Correct.
And you were applying for a tower that didn't meet that requirement.
Correct.
So here we were, plain English. We don't want towers. We don't want you to build on a site that doesn't have enough land to capture the tower when it falls. And yet you applied, and you've been here for a long time talking to us about it. And just for purposes of this discussion, let's assume, so there's the significant gap in coverage, which is a legal issue, because with that is my understanding, based on the case law you've sent me, you could argue that while you might not be able to convince us that we should grant you a variance under Massachusetts law alone, even though you might think you can.
Yep.
That's a hard hill to climb.
Yep.
If you can prove in your jurisdiction, the federal court, that you have a significant gap in coverage, and now Ed is saying that that standard is actually lower, just that you think that you want and need this coverage, we don't have to determine anymore. We don't have the right to determine anymore whether there's a significant gap in coverage. We just have to look, and, Michael, who is an honest man, has said, yes, the coverage will increase, the coverage will change, the coverage will be better with this tech. Then you would argue, I think legally, that means that while Massachusetts law doesn't have any of that notion, the federal law merges with Massachusetts variance law and says, well, that's a hardship, depending on how we frame the answer to that question. So I believe that our first question when we deliberate is there a significant gap in coverage? Or we take the FCC standard, which I'm not in this area, but I get the feeling that it hasn't been tested yet, but it's certainly, it's the FCC, but that's the question we need to answer. So if we answer the question honestly and with the evidence that there is a significant gap in coverage, then we don't really have to go to Massachusetts law and look at whether the lot shape is, whatever, and whether even though you created the lot size and you decided to have a lot that has water on it and you picked the lot.
We didn't decide to have water on it.
Yeah, but you picked the lot. So
Yeah.
I don't, under regular Massachusetts law, I think you have a tough hill to climb. If you want to speak to that, if you want to talk to me about Massachusetts law, why you think you need a variance, that's fine. But that's what I feel we're being presented with. So when you talk about how you're complying with the ordinance, and I know you're coming from the outside, coming in, and you're used to this, right from the beginning, I personally, and I'm assuming other members had the same concern, that's not what our ordinance wants. Our ordinance wants towers that fall within the property. So I want you to understand that. I'm not saying what my decision is. I don't think any of us really know yet what we're going to decide. We're going to have to talk it out. And I get the feeling that, again, I don't know if this is also a case of first impression, but that this idea that you've designed this in a safe manner somehow mitigates, even if you were to go into state law, even if the significant gap in coverage wouldn't fly, you would then argue, well, the only thing is this tower, and it's not, and as Michael said, not every community has it, and maybe we're stricter than others. And maybe we did get it from a model code, but it's in there for a reason. And by the way, when I talked to our peer review person, for the other peer review person, and I said, can you tell me that this design, this break design or bend design is as safe as a fall zone? He said, I cannot. So, and I've asked you, and we've asked you if you could, and Eric's going to ask you again, and maybe this is a good time, and we'll take a break and then we'll let the conversation continue. But I've yet to see any evidence that the bending or the breaking has happened yet, or you've done any kind of testing that says that it will work. Now, Ed made a comment about hurricanes in Florida, and I get it. And that's not my I don't have to have that perspective. My perspective is this bylaw is written for the safety of the citizens. That's what we put in. We put in the maximum safety provision. It has to fall within the lot. Otherwise, it's going to fall on a road.
Yep.
And so that's the whole thing. That's the whole case. Is the significant coverage? Is it enough to get you hardship? Is it enough to get it through the variance? And then, if this was just a special permit case and you had a fall zone that was 170 feet, then all the stuff you're talking about, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't argue with you. Again, the significant gap in coverage is still an argument, but it doesn't have the same presence as it does here. So that's really the center of your case, in my opinion.
I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
I think I would have an argument. And my argument would be that it's not just falling within the lot, it also has to be away from structures, I believe, is your fall zone. It has to be set back from structures, lot lines.
I don't have it in front of me, but I think it just has does it just have a height? Isn't it just a height?
There's other language with it. I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but.
Well, okay, fair enough.
So we look at if the risk is it falling, we're looking at, we don't want it to fall on other structures. We're looking for space. We're looking for space that's protected by trees. Part of your bylaw requires it to be buffered, requires it to be screened, preserving natural vegetation. So it's if there isn't a lot available, if there isn't a lot out there that supports this particular use, then the effective prohibition would necessitate a variance. And so again, we go out and we look at plenty of sites. One of the sites we looked at was the fairgrounds. Okay, it's not in one of the permitted zones at all in its entirety. It's in a zone that's below, so there's 1, 2, 3, there's rural residential is 4. Residential doesn't exist, so it's not even allowed in that zone. So we have to decide, is it better to seek a variance for a fall zone, or is it better to seek a variance to maybe put it on a piece of property that would be in front of and closer to more residences and in a zone where it's not allowed at all? And so it is a balancing of that. If you think about a facility that needs to be 170 feet tall and you take the radius of that 170-foot tower and you put that circle inside a square, you need I think it's like a 6-acre site within a general business district where you could design a tower that could fall and not hit anything.
But if you didn't have wetlands on that tower, the site would have been big enough.
That site, we probably could have found a way to push it further back.
So
if we didn't have wetlands, but we didn't put the wetlands there. The wetlands.
I don't want to,
Right.
I'm just, your response is understandable, but it leads to the same place. So you didn't use the fairgrounds because it has a problem. Now you want to use this site, but it has a problem. And there's another site that you can't use because it has a problem. This site has a problem. You can't meet one portion of our zoning bylaw. And so it has a problem, just like the fairgrounds has a problem. So I just want you to understand, I want to be honest about it. Again, I haven't decided this case in my mind.
Yep.
But from the very beginning, so everything you guys said all along, I was like, when are they going to tell me all about the 170 feet in the variance? And that has really not been dealt with enough. But I'm gonna, can you hold it?
I can.
All right, we're gonna take a break.
Thank you. But I'd like to hear from Mark after.
Absolutely, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna go till we don't want to go anymore.
Reasonable, all right.
Don't ask a lawyer what a reasonable thing is.
Define reasonable.
That's all we live by.
Can we define it?
Yeah.
5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Just say it has.
We
to
can
be-
do
it has
that,
to
5 minutes, but I know you're gonna take 10.
be located.
Thank you. Well, we gotta get Mark back here, but he'll be back soon.
Yeah, I know. I think very sick. Did you got one?
Yeah.
That just West, they did. Eric did.
I've downloaded it and printed it, but. I don't know. Oh, this is 2024. There's a new one.
Yeah, there's a new one that's updated, 2025.
Okay, it's on the website.
Where's the new ADU law?
I see that.
Right.
I see it in writing.
Actually, Eric, if we're talking about the ordinance and its up to dateness, there's two spots on, if you go into the city of Greenfield and then go to the zoning board and look for the ordinance, you told me that ordinance may not be as up to date as the code, right? The code, or are they both up to date the same way?
No, there's the PDF version,
Yeah.
which has the old numbers.
Yeah.
That's up to date.
It is,
The
okay.
E-code, we do once a year, it's not up to date.
Oh, that's the one that's up to date. Okay, thank you. So the one he has is up to date, but if I went to the E code, then, okay.
And never do a Google search for the zoning ordinance, because you'll get it wrong link. Always go directly to the site and download it directly.
Thank you. Good advice. Okay, we're back in meeting. Ed, you had something to say.
You were talking about the variance there, how that all came about with the Telecommunications Act of 1996. I mean, basically what happened was it's difficult to meet the state standard. I mean, that's a high hill to climb. So lot size, not even lot size, just some topography, shape, soil conditions. But as we were going through this, tower stuff and this cell service stuff, there came another, opportunity to avoid an effective prohibition. And that's why we end up at the First Circuit. You have a situation, we did Wayland, the town of Wayland told us years ago, we can't grant use variances, you're done. Well, federal court said, not really, you need to take into account whether there's a significant gap in coverage and whether there are available alternatives. So that's why you hear all of this about, I myself get confused about how does that intertwine? Now, I know the federal law preempts, but when you read the cases that the judges have come out with, it's kind of, well, you need to factor that in. You should go through your bylaw first. I think Shrewsbury, if you're interested, would say, but a town really needs to think about the effective prohibition. Remember, it's effective prohibition, not prohibition. We don't say that you're prohibiting, that your bylaw prohibits service because, for example, a fairground would work. Problem is your bylaw says fairground's not in play. That's where we end up with okay, what is the solution to this significant gap? So if you find that significant gap and you find that there's no alternative, now we come down to that balancing. Do we grant a variance for this fall zone? What's the purpose of the fall zone? So you got to go a little bit further than just, all right, the fall zone's here for this reason. I can tell you, I've been to towns that have a 5 times the tower height fall zone. We call it the tumbling tower syndrome. Well, there's no lot available that large. So they routinely go through their ordinance, routinely go through our coverage maps and determine, is there a gap? Is there an alternative? Is there a feasible alternative? If not, we grant a variance relief. So we do have those cases, Wayland, Swansea, that lay that out, take that into account. So, we sort of argue that, well, that's another standard being kind of patched into the Massachusetts state standard, because it's hard to beat. I mean, that's.
So it's interesting. So in Lawrence, they had a fall zone standard. I think it was, I forget whether it was 250 feet or for the height of the installation plus. And so I did what and the reason I talk about circumference and squares, I did that in the city of Lawrence. And so I took the city zoning map and then I made a circle and then I made a square around the circle. And I had the map up on a board and I had a shaded, but see-through, I forget what that's called, but we can put them on those overheads and you can project. Yeah. And I put the Mylar down on the table and I said, show me where I can put my tower. And the only place you could put the tower was the middle of the Merrimack River, was the only place you could find. So you have to find a feasible alternative, least intrusive. How do you make it work? And how do you pick which variants to seek? It's not an easy choice. I do think at some point when we look at the bylaw and again, you have a peer here tonight that potentially also a ZBA board member could chime in. I do think that this comports with the bylaw. It's, I think, a least intrusive. It's feasible, whereas there are no other feasible sites. And so you have to go with something. And if you pick a site that is the only feasible alternative or the least intrusive alternative, then under state law, that does support the basis for a variance. And I personally, and this is my own opinion, and that's why the 5 of you get to vote on this later. I think putting it surrounded by trees, close to the highway, close to the railroad tracks, adjacent to Tractor Supply and behind a self-storage facility is less intrusive than going to the fairground and getting a variance to put it in an area where it would be wide open to 30 or 40 residences. And that's kind of the balancing act we have to do as attorneys advising applicants on where to go and what to do.
Because so I do these where they're really nasty, like they're not allowed, they're prohibited in the zoning district, such as the fairgrounds. We have to go in and ask for a use variance. I mean, just as a land use lawyer, you go through the bylaw and you say, okay, the fairgrounds is big, it's, they'll lease it to us, we can do it. I go to the bylaw and it's like, man, use variance. First of all, does the town even have the authority to grant it? Secondly, how am I ever going to get a use variance that there's no other potential use? So when you're looking at that balancing, you have what I would consider a minor setback variance request based on good science, based on good engineering, that these towers, I mean, we put them everywhere. We do put them in their buildings. We put them in median strips on highways. We put them anywhere, but we engineer them to deal with the safety factor. So I think part of the analysis is what else is out there that works or that could work for AT&T, then how do we factor all that together? When you come down to you're the jury, you come down to I guess you're the judge.
I would point out, and you raise a great point.
We're the judge.
Under Massachusetts law, a dimensional variance is a much lower standard than a use variance. So obviously, our predisposition as land use lawyers is if you can find something that needs a dimensional variance and not a use variance, you're going for that dimensional variance. I'd much rather be in front of a board arguing. In fact, every community can give a dimensional variance. You can only give a use variance if your bylaw expressly allows a use variance. And so the ability to seek a tower on, say, the fairgrounds would not even be something that, I wouldn't recommend to a client that they go forward with that, because I think I'd have a much more difficult time proving that I couldn't have found a place where I needed a dimensional variance instead of a use variance.
I think at the end of the day, and then we'll give the board a chance to ask, we're at the 50-yard line here. So that's where we're at. You have questions for the engineer, any of the engineers, please.
Michael Lawton indicated that there's certainly a gap in coverage and there'll be an improvement of coverage. But he couldn't say there's a substantial lack of coverage.
Significant lack, significant.
And I'd like to hear from Mark.
Sure.
His definition of what he's done. We've heard I just said, it, and that comments from Mike. So I just need to hear from the other engineer. You know, is there, you know, significant lack of coverage? Will it improve significantly if we put the tower?
It's not my place to say what's significant, what isn't. As an engineer, I consider it significant from my standpoint, but that's not the standpoint that the board is looking at. Service will improve for everyone within the coverage gap and in downtown and the outlying areas that are currently being served by 5057 because it is simply overextended, serving things 3 miles away.
Every site in their network is identified by a number. So when he says 5057, if you look on one of our earlier maps, on any of our coverage maps, you'll see numbers on those maps, and those are the references. And if I think you read Mike's report, it talked about to the southwest, to the northeast, those are also 5057 is which one?
To the southwest, on the hill overlooking all of Greenfield.
That's currently there.
Yes. Yeah. That kind of design is a legacy design. Back to the days when I asked an analog, find the highest place and just let it go. It only has voice calls and everything's great. We're into digital now. Everything is digital, and high-speed data is the overwhelming majority of our traffic on the network. Voice is less than 1% of what traffic that goes through our network. And that giant site that used to cover everything for amps is getting to be a liability for digital. That's why T-Mobile and Verizon have gone downtown. We're going here to get a server to just do that area and not have to do everything else that 5057 does up and down 91 and over in other areas that this one can't quite reach. Take the burden off of that. Everyone on that site gets better service. Who's still on that site after.
Smaller areas, than the towers that went far and
Yeah.
wide.
And there are fewer users sharing that legacy tower to the southwest. When we come in with this one, people being served by that will get better service.
And this is based on 170-foot power.
Yes.
You have a question? Do you want to ask the question to the engineer about the break?
Yeah, a question for
Dominic?
Dominic, yes.
Yes.
About the safety of the design.
Thank you.
For the tower to fold as the reason that the board should consider it to be within the fall zone.
What's the question exactly?
Could you expand on the folding design and the safety, the proven safety of that?
Yes, so when we analyze the structures, the tower manufacturer that designs it, we had requested the tower to be designed with the highest stressed structural member near the midpoint of the tower. So in the theoretical circumstance where the tower fails due to high winds, the first section that should be overstressed and fail is near the middle of the tower, which should allow it to fold over itself and none of the tower even reach the ground. It's not something that you typically see happen ever because monopoles do not have the same track record of failure as you see other towers, but it's, theoretically the way the tower's designed should allow it to fold over itself at that midpoint with none of the tower contacting the ground or getting beyond the midpoint of the tower.
You used the word theoretically, so that raises the question, has this ever been proven in actual use?
So let me, go ahead, Dominic. Go ahead. So I believe, can you confirm for the board that I reached out to you as well as Valmont and asked us to please provide us evidence of any towers with midpoints that failed? And can you confirm for the board that neither All Points nor Valmont have any record of having towers that had midpoints that failed?
That's correct.
I have a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
How many years have these towers, how many, do you either have the number of towers that are out there or how many years this technology has been in actual use? It's great that none of them fall, and that's fantastic, but there's only 2 up. I'd like to know.
So I can tell you that, oh, go ahead. Yes,
Thank you.
Dominic?
Yep. In terms of the time frame of how often these structures have been up, I don't know the exact first date of the sort of monopole structures that we see now, but you're looking at minimum 50 years, 60 years.
With this breakpoint?
To be clear, that it's not a break point. The tower's not designed to
Okay.
fail. The tower's
Yeah,
Fold.
yeah. Let me re-ask the question.
Hinge.
In regards to this technology about having a full fold at a point, it's, its highest stress point, so it folds over itself. In high winds, in regards to that, what is the age of that, like, how old is the oldest pole that you know of that's been built and in existence? Was the most recent one installed 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, last week? And I'm sorry that sounds sarcastic. I'm just trying to clarify my question.
No, understood. Without knowing the exact designs of all of the structures, it's hard to say. It's possible that some of the earlier monopole type towers were designed with that in mind, but it's not a function of the exact. It's a function of designing a midpoint of the tower with a slightly different thickness of metal than it would have otherwise received.
Okay, let me ask you another question. And I'm sorry, Michael, if you have the answer for me.
Okay.
Are there any poles currently in existence that are up that have this technology that's been presented to us?
Yes, so
What is that?
so I can answer your question. I have done at least a dozen of these when I represented Nextel, and Nextel and Sprint merged in 2005. So I can tell you that this technology has been around definitively for more than 20 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I was trying.
No, I had a precise answer and I knew I could give you a date by just looking at the year in which Nextel and Sprint merged.
Thank you.
Besides high winds, what other factors are taken into consideration for that fold point? For example, earthquakes or terrorist attacks or what have you?
Regarding the tower design, the fold point is designed specifically to the typical failure point with these type of structures is the full design wind. That's really the main function that it's designed to in regards to the fold point.
Say that again, please.
The high wind is what the fold point is designed to. When you're looking at other design loads that are considered for the tower, whether it be seismic, ice loading, none of those have the same interaction with the tower as much of a stress as you get from the full design wind. So just from high winds.
It's your form. You did, go ahead.
Yep.
Hold on a second. What motivated this design? What motivated putting that into the poles? That's that feature.
That's, I believe I don't know the exact first use of it, but the reason for using it is for the theoretical fall zone to limit any possible distance that it could reach. So it's just a safety design.
Dominic, can I ask a quick question? How long have you been in this industry?
I've been working on tower structures engineering for 13 years at this point.
So
14 years about.
That's fine. I mean, I listen, I trust what you're saying, but I just need to hear these answers. Is the design of the tower and your representation that it will bend based on mathematics? Or is it based on actual tests, like a model being tested or something being done that would give you kind of a real live answer rather than just mathematics? I'm using mathematics as the tool. Maybe it's another tool, but the idea that
This sort of failure mode, to my knowledge, is based on 3D models, based on calculation, based on mathematics, as you say. I'm not certain if the tower manufacturers have done exact load testing to confirm that type of failure. I believe, Michael, you had reached out to request from them if they had done anything and they had not gotten back with that.
I did not ask them that specific question. So my point of asking how long Dominic has been in the industry is that these towers existed at least a decade before he even started in the industry. So, you know, whether or not he would have an understanding of what the industry experts did in, say, 1996, 97, 98, I don't know that he would have access.
That wasn't an essay question, no. I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
I think the, go ahead.
Oh, I just had one question for Dominic. What's the wind speed that would topple this tower?
That would topple the tower?
Yeah.
That's a much harder question to answer. In terms of the wind speed that it's designed to, it is, I have the analysis up here. It's designed to let's see, pull up the H standard wind speed. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the calculations to pull up the, so the wind speed it's designed to is 115 miles per hour.
Say
And
15 or 50?
100.
115.
115.
115, thank you.
Now, that's not the failure wind speed. That's the wind speed that, including multiple safety factors, that the tower is designed to withstand. A failure wind speed would likely be significantly higher, but it's hard to say what that exact failure wind speed would be. We don't design it to failure. We design the towers including significant amounts of additional safety factors beyond what the tower would fail at.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Would it be fair to say that the design for this tower, having that fold point built in, was in fact chosen because of the fall zone issue that with this site?
Or fall zones in general?
Or our tower?
Yeah, but I mean, they designed this because fall zones became part of the culture.
Correct.
Fall zones became part of the culture, so they had to overcome the fall zones by saying to communities, you don't have to worry about it falling all the way down, it's gonna bend.
And we instruct them. So when we have a site that we know needs a fall zone, we tell them to please design it with a fall zone. We explain that there is a fall zone and that we need this design to ensure that we can represent to a board that it will fall inside a certain radius. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so knowing that it was going to fall outside of the zone, should it fall, you put in the fold.
Correct.
As a design element.
Correct. We ask for the additional design element when we have a situation where we want to ensure, you know, no different than, let's say that there was a building close by and we wanted to ensure it. We might ask for that. If there was any other consideration, if it was near high electric power lines, things like that, whatever a consideration might be, we're instructing them to design it. We don't give it to them blindly and say, please design a tower for us. Here's the neighborhood.
Of course.
Yeah, no,
I have another question for one of you guys. One of the sites that was, I never even thought of it until I had a conversation with Michael Lawton earlier today. He mentioned that transfer stations or dumps are often picked for siting. And I wonder if the one in Greenfield, which is fairly isolated, but also very close to the fairgrounds, was that considered as a possible site?
When you say landfill, just so I have a perspective, that's in the GI zone southwest of the tower?
No, because if
southeast?
it's, no, if it's near the fairground, it is not in the southeast.
There's something map right behind you that
Okay.
at the bottom is the area he's talking about.
Yeah, it's very close to the fairground, actually.
See the gray area
Quarter
there?
of a mile, maybe.
Right above that is the fairground.
That's the fairground.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's outside of the coverage gap. It didn't meet the criteria to fill the coverage gap, but it's also currently leased to a solar company. It has a solar farm.
It says the solar, that's what I was asking. about.
Yes, yeah, that's
Actually, I think the great station
It's a little bit north.
west side.
Yeah, there is a solar
Yes.
farm.
Top of the south.
So that, so that you couldn't, they're not compatible, having a cell tower with a solar farm?
If it wasn't capped.
That's a cap landfill, the cap landfill.
Got it. So Michael, Mr. Lawton looked at it and that particular lot.
I think it's
Is,
northwest of whatever, what's the name of that road?
Mr. White?
Cumberland.
Cumberland Road.
Wisdom Way, yeah, it's
So-
northwest of Wisdom Way, if I'm not wrong.
So that portion isn't on a lot that is RA, which is not an allowed district.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a residential zone. Okay. Good question.
Could I, just to let you, this isn't an engineering response, just personal experience. We do these fall zone designs all the time. Like when we were out in the middle of fields or in the middle of the large parcels, we're looking for booming coverage. We never needed a fall zone relief. Now we need it almost everywhere because we are getting closer and closer to the public and to where people live, to where people work. So 2 weeks ago, I designed the same thing. I'm 40 feet off the property line. Got zoning approval. So this is constant now, either fall zones from buildings, property lines, anything where there's going to be some kind of fall zone. So yes, we do design to address the fall zone.
But it would be nice if you were able to present the boards with a simulation result instead
So-
of just.
Yeah, so, this is always an interesting conversation because every structure has limits. So that, anything you're approving, a shopping center, a house, everything has engineering design. They designed them not to fail. They designed them not to tip over from the base. And what Dominic is saying is that they've designed this pole with the manufacturer to bend over when the wind load gets to be too much. So, I mean, it's almost a situation where somebody's house is going to blow into our tower before the tower goes up.
No, but you're using it as a mitigation, so it's different.
We are.
Well, it's different. It has a different purpose. It's not just built into it's not just one of many things. It's the key focus of what you're asking us to do. You're saying, I mean, no one could dispute that if it was in a falls, if you had the fall zone and it fell, it's not going anywhere. It'll fall down. It'll fall down. That'll be the end of it. But because it'll fall down on a road or whatever, you're telling us that you have designed something that's almost as safe, but you haven't given us any evidence that leads us to believe that it is as safe as you represent. And so that's what we're left with.
So I would respectfully disagree. I would say that we were asked for engineering data to provide it to the engineer that sits on your board, and we did. And I would say that we paid for an independent, so we had a peer review, and then we paid for an independent peer review of the town's choosing, and that peer review consultant concluded the same thing. You asked him, can he guarantee you it'll never fall? And he said, of course he can't guarantee.
No, he said that if it breaks, it will fall down on the spot. That's what he said.
Okay.
And secondly, he said, yes, from my understanding of the industry, your tower is designed within the industry standards. We're now peeling away the onion of the industry standards, saying, how are those industry standards set up? Are they set up with engineers doing mathematical calculations and all saying that they're okay because 5 people did the same calculations and they're correct? Or did somebody actually do a simulation? I think it's a fair question and we've heard the answer. And I'm just telling you that when you continue to try to sell it to us, I'm saying to you, maybe you should think about that as being something to consider. You don't have to, and maybe it's just a footnote, but
My only point would be, if we had known this when the peer consultant were here, we would have asked the peer consultant to confer with our expert and provide that information. If somebody had raised it, I do think where tonight is supposed to be the last night, if this board, and I want to close the hearing tonight. I want to close the hearing for everybody in this room. If the board is telling me that I should contact Topco, who I think is the consultant, and ask them to speak to Valmont and ask them to write a letter to you to say, do they know when hinged towers were designed? Did anybody do field testing or anything like that? I'd be happy to go and get the answer for you. Again, this has kind of been in the back of our mind once the peer consultant came in and we had that discussion, I'm going to say back in February, but I don't disagree with the question you're asking today. If I had known the question in February, I would have gotten you the answer.
well, with all due respect, I asked it at the February meeting, and it's been asked and asked and asked. Maybe it hasn't been asked this way, but it has been asked. I don't know whether well, the board will decide at some point whether there's more information. I'm just pointing out to you, though, that these are the questions that the board has, not that they're definitive, but.
Understood.
And this is finally about the construction piece. I have a structural engineer who's licensed to do the design, peer review done by a professional engineer, and another peer review. For me, I'm comfortable with that recommendation. Board can disagree with me, but that is what I've been doing my entire career. Okay, so, we have all the legalese debate, but where I'm coming from, I've heard 3 engineers tell me it is satisfactory. If I hear that, I would do it. Okay. Because I've done that my entire career.
No, I agree. And I guess the only other thing I would add is anecdotally, you have a monopole in town, correct? And it withstood winds and earthquakes and it's still standing there right next to the country club. And it's been there for 24 years.
I respect all the conversation. I've been doing this a long time.
Yep.
If it's done that way, I would have done it.
Okay, fair enough.
Mr. Chair, and there is a building code provision for monopoles. How, they all
I'm
have.
sure there is.
There's a specialized, design that has to meet a certain code now. Again, I'm just, when you say, well, they're just being calculated, well, the Mass Building Code establishes what the tower has to do, and then we're adding in this breakpoint, so.
But I think what Peter said is helpful, so.
David, it helps you, David. I agree. I feel that they satisfied their requirements that we asked them with everything they provided with us.
And I've made a lot of decisions that asking other engineers, will it fall? Can you guarantee me? No engineer in their right mind is going to say, I guarantee it's the first time. So, to have propose that question to an engineer, myself included, but give that statement to anyone would be foolish. So, for what it's worth, I'm comfortable with the peer review and the design of that structure, and we'll do what it's supposed to do.
Okay,
Thank you.
Jim.
Dave, I've worked for 45 years for AT&T, Dynex, Bell Atlantic, MCI, WorldCom, Verizon, taking care of the equipment at the towers, going up in a snowcat on Mount Tom in the middle of winter. Never had a tower fall on me, never had a tower break in all the storms. In fact, absolutely safe working at it. They met all federal and state regulations, and I'm not worried about the tower at all.
Okay. I haven't been convinced on the issue of adequate coverage or whatever the right word is, but certainly from the cell tower design, I
appreciate it. Thank you.
Anybody else?
We still talking about structural integrity and monopole? Sure. No, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Something else when we're done with that.
Up with Mark.
Go. You have another question?
Of course. I'm not entirely sure who this question is for, so I guess it's kind of to you or perhaps Michael to you, and we can try to parse this out a little bit. I'm getting kind of hung up on the word significant, because I see like even in your briefing here, it's riddled with significant gap in coverage. We've continually heard this term. We've heard from 2 radio frequency engineers. I'm not touching whether or not this is significant, but we've also heard it's one of the key questions in front of us. So I guess I'm getting a little confused of, is anybody defining significant anywhere? What is the metric? How are we supposed to make this decision when it seems like everybody's got their own take on what constitutes a significant gap in coverage? and it's not being defined anywhere. And yet it's being kind of held over us as a key thing to put aside and to potentially land in litigation. So what are we supposed to do with this understanding of what constitutes, or this lack of understanding of what constitutes significant? Question. I don't like, so it feels to me like that's the onus is on me to decide whether or not there's a significant gap. I don't know how to do it when everybody's got their own take on what constitutes significant.
I believe the Cranston case says that it falls on the applicant, the carrier, to describe what it believes it needs for its coverage to comply with its federal license. And I believe, as we talked about earlier, the Cranston case provides that if an applicant puts together what they consider to be presumptive evidence or factual evidence of how they define their coverage needs and whether or not they find this to be a gap of significance as to the service that it is intending to provide, I believe that's what the Cranston case said. In the absence of factual evidence to the contrary, that it creates a presumption based on the applicant's design, because they're the only ones that can design their network. They're the only ones that know what they need and what they're trying to accomplish. And so I believe they default to the applicant to try and define that. And then from there, it would be subject to factual evidence developed by a third party to dispute that evidence.
So,
No, go ahead, and then I have a question. You might answer my question.
so see, you need to look at, I mean, that's why we provide all these statistics. So I'm going to ask Martin, from his as an RF engineer, would he consider the gap significant? And your answer would be?
As before, yes.
Right, but it's not the question that he asked, is it significant? That's your decision to make. So you look at the number of people who get coverage, size of the roads. If you go through the case law, because significant gap has been decided by judges, been decided by the FCC, but it is like if we were trying to cover 2 houses and that was it, I'm not sure anybody would say that's a significant gap. If you look at the Cranston case, it talks about covering 1 cul-de-sac wouldn't be a significant gap. When you look at all the population, the area of coverage that we're going to get, roadways, acreage, streets, neighborhoods, that's where you make the determination, is that significant or is it 10 people that need coverage?
And to your point, some of the cases talk about facts in those cases. I don't believe that there is a case where a judge said significant is defined as blank. That doesn't exist. If that existed, I would have put it in the memo. And Massachusetts First Circuit, all of the cases we've worked on, it's really more those boards making a determination what they do think is or is not significant, and then hopefully not having a judge have to review it and make a decision to say, 3% additional coverage is not significant, 7% additional coverage is. There isn't a judge that has statistically sat down. And when you think about when you go into court and you're going in front of a judge, they're picking A or B. They're generally not being asked, could you please define significant? They are being presented with a case where a particular carrier goes in and says, we have these concerns and we believe it's significant, and the judge will say yes or no. And then the next judge will get a case that has different factors and someone will argue, is that significant? And they'll say, the judge will say yes or no. And now you say, okay, well, we had one judge over here that said 2 houses isn't significant or a cul-de-sac isn't significant. We had a judge over here that said a college campus is significant. Okay, well, we've you're building bookends, but there isn't, again, to my knowledge, and I think to your knowledge, because we've talked about this, there is not one judge who has issued a ruling that said, here is how boards should define significant. Not that I'm aware.
The evidence we provided you is the radio frequency report that we submitted with the application for AT&T's network. So that's C-squared, that original report that shows all of the population counts, the size of the gaps, it describes it, how far the gaps are on certain roads. That's the sort of stats.
And again, knock on wood, if we had to ask a judge to decide, we would ask the judge to think about what Mr. Vernon said and what the fire chief said. So it's our statistical information, but it's also independent third parties who have come to a hearing who are neither with the applicant or with the opposition group, who have independently come forward and said, we believe that we have a problem.
Can I ask Mark how he made that statement?
Yeah.
I mean, and I know I asked it
Yeah.
differently before, but I just heard him say there is.
As an engineer, he said, not as a lawyer, but as an engineer. Yes. Yeah.
State US that as an officer here, if I'm looking at a gap like this, I'm trying to serve my customers, missing that much road, that much area, that many people in service. I don't want that many people going to now.
It's the first time I've heard a statement of that type.
That's why I asked if we go back.
Yeah.
His report is littered with words again.
The question I had earlier was what does AT&T use as their criteria to determine significance? And I think, and I'm drawing a blank,
Martin.
thank you. We've always said it 3 times in the last 2 minutes.
That's what I call Peter Martin after something.
Do I get points for that? That they're relying on his expertise in his regard to his interpretation of the information. So I feel satisfied as to why they consider this to be significant. I'm not gonna say I agree with it, but I understand why they're coming and saying,
Do you have any more questions? So do you
no,
have
I'm
any
not.
questions on your side of it? Like you understand why he thinks it's significant, but do you think it's significant? And if you don't, do you?
I'm gonna save my thoughts and feelings on things until the deliberation.
Okay.
I think we should move this meeting forward into the next, I'd like to really close this part of it, so I don't know if we're close to that.
I'm also.
I'm hoping.
No, we do have, if we have the
Well-
concerned citizens.
Well, I know we have the concerned citizens, but I think we're at a way to point where we can close there.
I have no more questions.
And I just asked after the concerned citizens speak, if there is an issue, we would just have the opportunity to respond.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is Alana, are you ready to speak?
Do you mean Leonora Alanis?
Sorry, hi.
Oh, Elana, okay.
Are you ready for me to speak?
Please.
Okay. I just want to address something I submitted to the ZBA tonight, and then I will move to my other comment. I have submitted a signed affidavit demonstrating calls I made along Highway 91 at 22 different mile markers heading north and south from the Greenfield Circle. In the affidavit, I included the locations and time I placed the calls with the Samsung phone using the carrier T-Mobile, and attested to the fact that the signal strength was high and the quality of each of the calls was excellent. In the second supplemental filing, the applicant suggests that if they are not able to provide more reliable coverage in the area, that they could lose customers to other carriers who are. T-Mobile is currently providing excellent coverage in the outlined areas with the current cellular infrastructure that exists, meaning we have enough cell towers to fully cover this area. The additional coverage that AT&T proposes for this area is not based on the FCC maps warranted, nor does it necessitate the building of a new tower, but rather a co-location at the existing towers that are already housing cellular infrastructure and providing excellent coverage for Verizon and likely other wireless carriers for the area. Tonight is about whether the applicant has met the criteria for the variance and special use permit required for this tower in a residential area. There are other noted viable placement options and alternative co-location options that must be explored fully, and clearly they have not. In the second supplemental filing, the applicant acknowledges that the ZBA wanted hard data, but has yet to provide it. We are still waiting for requested actual performance data on the hinge tower design, not just the compliance report submitted, not just these towers don't fail. They do fail. You can research it online and find hundreds of towers that have fallen for many different reasons. We are still waiting for the process and testing methodologies that were used to evaluate the alternative sites and the detailed reports for each of those evaluated alternative sites, not the basic reports that we have received that simply indicate a site is too far away without any further quantifying data. We are also waiting for the drop call logs, which we have discussed tonight, that are a necessary part of an accurate needs assessment, especially in this case where there are discrepancies in the coverage data with regards to the submitted propagation maps and the maps formally on record with the FCC. The residents requested the drop call logs months ago, and they were formally requested by the ZBA at the last public hearing. The drop call logs would, in calibration with the propagation maps, FCC maps, and drive test data, possibly quantify a significant gap in service and need for additional coverage. The applicant, instead of providing this harder data as requested by the ZBA, has provided only a drive test. An Isotope's initial report had recommendations for the applicant regarding their full pursuit of other viable locations. The report's content has now suddenly changed in the 11th hour that proposes to have resolved many of those questions included in the initial report. It should be noted that drop call log data in combination with drive-by testing, propagation maps, and modeling are still the gold standard analysis of significant need agreed upon by various engineers. The applicant is refusing to provide this needed information to validate the need for the cell tower that again has been requested by the ZBA and the Greenfield residents. Verizon provides drop call log data when requested, and proprietary status is an AT&T business decision alone. Failure to provide this data when requested and able to should be seen as an indicator that the data does not support the coverage claims. Just as AT&T considers the drop call laws one of metrics, so can and should the ZBA. Our intention is not to use drop call logs in isolation, but again, in combination with drive-by testing combined with propagation maps, modeling, and FCC maps for a full analysis of need. The ZBA is allowed to ask for any information it deems relevant for this discussion. Applicable case law supports that drop call logs may be one consideration to demonstrate significant gap, which is one of the requirements for the variance approval. There are still too many unproven and unresolved questions regarding the need and safety of this tower. There are also too many essential data reports that significantly differ from one another, including engineering reports that were originally in question of the applicant that again have suddenly changed. And after several hours of testimony and applicant submissions, we, the concerned citizens, do not have the clear, definitive, and reliable data needed to prove a true gap, to prove residents' continued safety, and to meet the criteria needed for this variance request. For these reasons and more, I join the other Greenfield residents in urging that you deny the variance for this tower and find a safer and more appropriate placement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, I did tell people that this will be a moment to speak. Is there anyone else on line that wants to say?
Looks like Jonathan.
Jonathan, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few points. I'll try to move through them.
Excuse me, can you tell us who you are and where you live?
Yep. Jonathan Mirren. I live at 224 Avery Brook Road in Charlemont. And I have I run a theater company, and I have two employees who live near the tower. That's one of my points of interest in this particular tower. But I've actually followed tower proceedings, around the area, and I would say that this is about roughly the 10th RF engineer report that I've listened to. None of those 10, except for one, seriously questioned any of the assumptions of the applicants. That's 9 out of 10. The one exception was actually Isotope when they were hired by the abutters. Anyway, so my point that I want to move to is the applicants assert in their second submittal filing that the proposed cell tower will cost $1 million. They ask that with scarce capital, why would they place a cell tower where it's not needed? In terms of scarce capital, AT&T made more than $1 billion last year, and they're currently rated the world's 70th most valuable company. Why would then this company put a cell tower where it's not needed? As has been suggested before, to break into the home internet market. The estimated value of the home internet market is projected to reach $547.89 billion in 2025. Specifically, the home internet market is expected to reach $632 billion by 2028, with a 17% growth in annual revenue since 2023. That is why they want to put a tower where it's not needed, and why you, as the ZBA of Greenfield, should deny this request for the variance. The applicant, one of the applicant's attorneys made a point earlier about, why would we want to do it at the fairgrounds when there would be 30 residences affected? In my mind, it's not about whether you're going to impact the life of 30 people or 3 people. I've met the people who live directly across the street in the closest proximity to where this tower would fall. There's an elderly gentleman, and then there's a single dad with 2 young girls. And I would just really support your inquiry into feeling that their safety is as important as, essentially, if the fairgrounds, it would fall and not go out of the lot, then basically AT&T doesn't want to deal with 30 people who don't, like these residents of Newton Street, know that they have coverage. AT&T's map, as I said before, Attorney Campanelli can't say it as eloquently or as forcefully. I can't say it as forcefully as he made clear at the last hearing. On AT&T's map and the FCC map that AT&T's coverage, there's no gap in coverage. The gap that they're describing is that they don't have 5G coverage in those areas. That's not the test. The test is whether calls drop or not. And as Alana pointed out, they haven't provided the requested drop call data. They provided a drive-by from an engineer that they hired. So it's not that you just have to wonder at this point, after so many hearings, do they think, what is their assessment of, the ZBA's ability to discern sort of the facts in front of them? Because it's that they have not addressed the fact that their own map shows complete coverage, and that the FCC does not. You don't have to make a decision about whether they can provide 5G or whether they can cut into GSET's market. You have to make a decision about, can people make a call? They can. We know that, as Alana just did a signed affidavit. Anyone who's driven around the area knows the calls are not dropping. 5G, what they should apply to put small cells. If their goal is to provide 5G coverage to the residents of Newton Street, they can put up small cells.
Jonathan, can you sum up?
Yep. So I think the last thing I'll say is that I don't know if Dr. Chamberlain is on the call. I saw his hand was raised. We have an expert in propagation maps who doesn't have a vested financial interest, is not being paid by industry, and is ready to talk about these propagation maps again to you. And I would just ask that you hear him out. Thank you.
Lenore?
Yes, hello. I am Leonore Alanis, and I live actually across the river in Turner's Falls, also known as Great Falls. And I have a small statement to read. I want to continue the discussion on resident safety. As has been discussed prior, the residents many months ago requested performance safety data on the hinge tower design, since the proposed towers has an inadequate fall zone that will affect a residential area. To date, we have not seen any of this verification data. Assurances are not sufficient, so I listened to all of you, and you have plenty discussed this now, and I followed it all along with great interest. So since we do not have the performance data on the hinge design that demonstrates its reliable safety, we cannot fully and meaningfully assess its level of risk when placed in a residential area and the possible detrimental impacts on residents and so forth. Without it, the criteria needed for the approval of this variance in terms of detriment to residents and community remains unproven. The only way to assure resident safety is to not allow to err, basically, while it is not assured, rather to wait and until the variance for height and to require a full and adequate fall zone for any proposed cell tower. So since I listened, I went online and I got actually some data from Wikipedia that which towers have collapsed and when. And this is a worldwide Wikipedia report. The construction is really interesting. There is a term called GUYED, G-U-Y-E-D, a guide mast. It's an engineering term I have never heard, and lattice steel. So maybe it means something to the people who are familiar with tower engineering. The last big one was in the 1980s. Usually the towers fell due to an ice storm, lightning, or other hurricane-like storms. So they didn't just, when there comes, however, another thing, the lady here to my left on the long side of the table, she asked earlier, what's the life expectancy basically? Steel does have a life expectancy, just like with airplanes, I think. I forget the proper term, it escapes me now, but there is a weakening of the structure of metal that just like bridges, that should be taken into account and in that cell tower construction. So this is a little bit of data, and I'm closing here with, and I thank you all very much for listening to me.
Thank you for your time. Thank you. Stephanie?
Stephanie Duclos, Chapman Street. I've heard a lot of argument going on. David, I was right there with you when you were arguing and litigating back with the AT&T attorneys. All my notes were written down and you hit every point that I wanted to touch upon. Also, I did have a question that I know you guys can't answer questions. So I believe that it's the board's duty to balance the needs of, Greenfield. And there are multiple carriers. I've had all of them. I have T-Mobile right now, and I don't have any gap in my coverage. I've had AT&T. There was a reason why I moved to T-Mobile. So if we had all three carriers sitting at that table, every one of them would argue, well, we need this cell tower and we need you to consider this fall variance and affect these neighborhoods and devalue their homes and impact the quality of life, because one of the arguments that is going to go, someone's suing our board, whether it's the abutters and the citizens directly, that group and their representation, or it's going to be AT&T, but Greenfield's getting, having the appeal. So I'm always concerned that if all the boxes aren't checked, this is going to cost Greenfield money, and who's going to be the easier person to battle in a courtroom? And that's always the citizen and not the Goliath. And they could drag it out and settlements will be made. And this is how we get eminent domain. And, what's the tax benefit to us? I mean, are we taxing cell phone towers? Because you're devaluing all the abutting properties in that neighborhood. What is that going to do in an already tight budget that we have when we continually give tax exempt builders like, solar panels and cell phone towers, our land to build, taking it away and devaluing other land that abuts it. Those are considerations, and it's always, what's the balance? I don't think that that AT&T has produced enough evidence to prove financial hardship, which is, I believe, why you ask for, drop call data and all that stuff. I think it's because they also have to prove they're financially harmed. When I didn't have coverage in my home, when I had Sprint offered me a signal booster that was specific to their tower, and because of the construction of my home and asbestos siding, it wouldn't matter if I had the tower right outside my door. The construction of my home would not suffice the signal inside. So they gave me something personal. So I think that if they have a market that's significant at GCC and it's not, it's an, or, you know, if it's an existing market, not an untapped market as to where I think AT&T would think is significant, you know, we have an untapped market and maybe this broadband, but we also
Stephanie,
have a local broadband.
I'm going to ask you to summarize at this point, but I want to thank you for what you're saying. But
So I also wanted to say that I had offered a parcel for consideration, 9.9 acres. I sent the parcel information to the board chairman. I believe Mr. Turog had forwarded that to the board for a bona fide offer for a remedy in case, you know, to protect the citizens of Greenfields tax-paying dollars to not be sued, that we didn't offer a viable solution to both parties.
Okay,
So
thank
thank you.
thank you. Jimmy?
Yes, I'd kind of like to echo what Jonathan said. I believe this is I'm a gamer, so I understand the internet around here. I've looked at every single company out there. And I would just like to consider the fact that we've invested a lot of money in our local internet company through taxes, and to actually like just let the competition of our local internet come in and bully us, that's gonna hurt us on the other end too. Aren't we trying to like promote GSAT and stuff like that? So I think this is more of an internet issue because they have really crappy internet, home internet in this area for T-Mobile. Because I've checked, I was gonna switch from GSAT, and I don't know if the board does have the skill base to I forget the gentleman's name that was on the board, but he's saying, how am I supposed to vote on this? So I don't know where this needs to go, but I don't even think that anyone on this board is capable of seeing if there is a significant drop in gap or whatever. And that's all I really have to say.
Thank you. Gotta leave? Is that the right pronunciation?
Godeliev, it's okay.
Good, yeah. That's much nicer.
So yes, so my name is Godeliev Richard, and I live in Charlemont. But yes, I know some people that are going to be living close to the tower, hopefully not there. So yeah, I just had some short comment. I have to remember what I want to say. Yeah, I'm just wondering a little bit why AT&T would want to keep on pushing technology on a community that doesn't want the tower. That's a question I had. Because there was something they said, like if everybody loves technology and that's the future and that's all what we want, but that's not the reality. Actually, many people like low tech and would be happy with like low or no coverage. So I would like that everybody knows in this meeting, at least, that some people actually are looking for no coverage. And so if there is low coverage that might be good for this community, they might not need more than that. Yes, I'm asking, I guess, everybody to respect the people in America. Please respect us, respect the people who are going to live there. There's rules, there's this and this and that, but what about respect? What about the laws of love and God? Just like, yes, I'm asking AT&T to be respectful, to realize that not everybody wants a lot of tech and they are not as popular as what they say.
Thank you. Okay, so now I promised two people. Name and address, please.
Suzanne Murray, 970 Street. So I'm going to skip over what I had actually wanted to say before because I'm not sure of it anymore, but I do have something I would like to read. I would like to share a legal opinion from attorney Robert Bird. He is an expert telecommunications attorney and a legal consultant for the Environmental Health Trust. This legal opinion is in response to statements made in the applicant's attorney's letter submitted to the ZBA in the second supplemental filing. This is in regards to statements on the FCC's material inhibition and its relationship to the First Circuit Court's true legal standard. From attorney Robert Bird, quote, "From my review, the lawyer's letter in the second supplemental filing is filled with inaccuracies. Notably, the AT&T lawyer relies heavily on the FCC's September 18th order on material inhibition, which the First Circuit Court has not adopted as legal standard. The attorney quotes the FCC as saying the courts have the standard wrong, when it is the courts who interpret the law, not the FCC. The courts in the First Circuit must follow the First Circuit legal standard, which is, for there to be effective prohibition of service, the board must have denied the cell tower permit where the applicant has proven that it has a significant gap in coverage, and that its proposed tower is the least intrusive technologically feasible means to close the significant gap in coverage. That's the legal standard, not the FCC's materially inhibition standard. Also, the attorney denigrates the FCC National Broadband Map over AT&T's propagation map for Greenfield to this tower," end quote. It is extremely important to the residents and to this case that the ZBA have the accurate legal information and interpretation from unbiased, non-biased sources to make this pivotal decision that will significantly impact a community residential area. The fact that you've received this level of inaccurate information from the applicant's attorney speaks volumes and shows that they do not have a sincere, good faith interest in your full understanding of the laws that govern this decision. But rather they craft their legal sharings and statements in such a way that actually misleads with the intention of communicating a legal scenario where you are legally bound or obligated in ways that you are not with regards to this decision. In response, the residents formally request that between this evening and the vote on the cell tower, that the ZBA consult with one of the independent, non-vested expert telecommunications industry attorneys with regards to both your rights to regulate and the validity of the legal information brought forth by the applicant's attorney with regards to those legal norms, obligations, and rights. We respectfully request that you consult with Attorney Campanelli, Attorney Berg, or Attorney Scott McCullough, the country's leading independent legal experts in this field, and we will be following up with contact information for this purpose. We all need to be absolutely assured that we are operating legal facts, and I think we can all see, given this one example, that there is more to be learned. Thank you.
Go ahead. Name and address again, I'm sorry.
So Andrew Burns, 17 Sunset Square, Greenfield, Massachusetts. So several things. So number one, to define significant, there's a couple of things that you should all keep in mind. AT&T previously stated that there is well, then they can speak for themselves, but they previously articulated that on Route 91, there's a give or take a 2-mile stretch along 91 where FirstNet service needs to be provided. So 2 miles, in my opinion, is pretty significant. So significant is also a neighborhood that can have a positive service if it is made available. So I live in an area that would have a positive impact. Today, I had a dropped call with my wife right down the road. The other weekend was commencement at Greenfield Community College. I had dropped calls there. I also did not have FirstNet service at Greenfield Community College, open sky, clouds, but open sky nonetheless. FirstNet service was absent. So that is significant. The fire chief, as others have mentioned, have also commented about that as well, that there are gaps in service throughout the city, let alone in this geography. So Greenfield Community College, generally speaking, Verizon generally speaking, Verizon will have positive reception more than T-Mobile and AT&T. I've lived down the road for 15 years. I now work there, the vice president of IT for Greenfield Community College. I hear the complaints that employees and students have when it comes to the reception of their cell phones on the cellular networks with the carrier. Now, those are conversations that the users, clients should have with T-Mobile or AT&T, not with us. But nonetheless, those folks do complain about absence or diminished service of T-Mobile and AT&T in that neighborhood. I'll mention again, as I have before, significant is the definition of if you go to the Big Y parking lot and you can't get AT&T cellular service. Not sure how much more significant it needs to be than that. So through the chair to AT&T, I appreciate that my drop call data on AT&T has not been shared. A little bit of a personal note, I am offended that others are demanding of AT&T dropped call data of me. So I just want to put that out there. The drop call data is not a valid metric. And if you want that valid metric, I can tell you all those drop calls that I experience or that others that I work with or live in that community experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's
Right over there. Oh, I'm sorry.
Jennifer Vernon, 17 Sunset Square. I've had AT&T for years. I mean, I'm talking probably 2 decades now. Lived in our house for 15 years. I can tell you 100% I'm in that drop zone. I'm in that drop zone. I don't understand why it matters about the drop zone thing with them. I don't get it. All I know is it seems important that they hold the industry, they hold that to their chest. That's fine. I can tell you, I'm in that drop zone. My calls drop constantly. I've got 2 children also. We walk, go around. I also go to GCC. We have the same problem. GCC, we are in that drop zone. I go for walks around my neighborhood. I'm in that drop zone. It's just reality. I'm not about to leave AT&T. That's just not me personally, but I can understand them wanting to give other people a better service. I really would love a better service. But I've had AT&T forever, so I'm not going to change anyway. Also, my husband is a member of FirstNet. I don't understand what that means. What I know is that he feels strongly about this. So when we are out and about, anywhere we go, my husband will show me his phone. I got FirstNet. I don't have FirstNet. Don't have FirstNet. Telling you, if you need a question, I know there's that person. I know there's him. I understand it's not enough, but I understand. I'm going to tell you, I'm constantly being told, I'm constantly being shown that FirstNet service is not available to people on AT&T service. The reason why it's really important to me is because aside from my husband being on making that important, it's also important because GCC's right there. It's important to me, and we can't communicate. And I think they should all communicate and everything here. So that is it. Everybody, and thank you guys so much for all your work. You guys are awesome. Seriously.
It's the nicest thing
Thank you.
that's been said tonight. Yes, ma'am. Name and address.
Oh, Terry Cashner, Greenfield, Old Street. I wanted to say something, and I wanted to read something too. It's probably redundant because you guys are obviously very well informed. But you have the lawyer, I can't remember his name, and then you have Ken Chamberlain, which is basically was just dismissed. Both showing you that there's not significant and it's not significant. I know that there's problems and it has to be addressed. Not saying that that's not true, because it is. But, I don't think, I mean, so what is it gonna be? He said, she said, I mean, how are you gonna really determine that? And how can you make a decision if you can't really determine that? You know? You guys know what I'm saying? Anyway, this evening, I would like to visit what has happened with this application and the applicant's submissions. Specifically, I would like to address the engineering report. The applicant submitted an engineering report from Isotope dated May 23rd. The report indicated in part that full due diligence did not appear to have been done in regards to fully assessing other alternate sites for the proposed cell tower. Soon after receiving and submitting the May 23rd report, the applicant asked for a postponement of the next public hearing. A new engineering report labeled as updated on June 2nd was submitted, and this new updated report had somehow cleared up the questions on alternative locations. Due diligence presented in the original report. It appears that the applicant got an initial engineering report that they did not like, as it did not validate that there were no other viable options of replacement of the proposed tower, which would be required as criteria for this to allow this ordinance. On receiving the initial report, the applicant scrambled. They asked for a postponement of next meeting. Then they came back in the 11th hour with engineering shows the issues of other viable placements somehow more resolved. It is a noted pattern of the telecommunications industry to have new reports issued. They do not like the findings of the report. This has been deemed known reports on the industry for many years. It was clear to the residents what happened here. Isotope was told to revisit the report and produce one more to the applicant's liking and favor, which makes it both factually unreliable and unacceptable. It should be noted that Isotope is owned by David Maxon, who is associated with the industry and a very open proponent for wireless infrastructure. This now revised report is a display of industry power, not a display of fact. For this reason, residents do not hold the updated report as reliable data, nor do we accept the new report as fact. Another one of the many concerning discrepancies presented by the applicant on behalf of the project and another very sound reason to deny this variance.
All right. Heather's iPad.
Hello, Heather Newell, 33.
Heather, please be sensitive that the hour is growing late. If you can summarize what you're going to say in a shorter rather than longer way, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sounds perfect. I just wanted to remind you that I live on Lower Laurel Street, and that I do get drop calls in my house and even around the neighbors around me. It's not just about cell phones. I'm on Wi-Fi calling here, but also medical equipment. I have family members that have like heart monitors that report back to the doctors, and believe it or not, that goes through cell phone towers. So doesn't like lifeline activations. I don't want to get in the argument, and you probably heard enough of call data and all this other stuff. The safety of the tower. I don't want the tower to fall on anybody. So I'm confident that if you're confident that it's safe, it'll be okay. I'm hoping you guys can get that confidence. That would be my number one, is safety. Number two would be my own selfishness, having cell phone service in my house. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Chamberlain wants to speak. Do we want to hear her?
It's late.
It's very late. I can make this very quick. It seems like a lot of this discussion hinges upon inside, in vehicle.
We're respectful for their hearing, and we did not speak. The agreement tonight was that we would get to.
Hold on.
The hour is getting late, and we all have a 2-hour ride home. I
did, Dr. Chamberlain, I did not recognize you to speak yet, although I know it's difficult. That's fine. I know it's difficult with the Zoom, and you may have heard me say something that acknowledged that. Does the board want to hear? No disrespect to you, Dr. Chamberlain. No. It sounds like the board does not want to hear anything else, and we thank you very much for everything that you've done.
Thank you. I wish you a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, so probably want to say something to have, because you're the applicant.
2 minutes or less, I can do this.
And you want to say something about that? You want to say it, you think you should say it first or let them say it?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
The woman who just left now and Elena have both indicated that there's some sort of nefarious scheme here going on about editing reports and that sort of thing, but given the late hour that I was engaged in this proceeding, we've kind of compressed stuff to get things moving quickly and to get a report in front of the board that could be used in an objective way to evaluate something. I put out a draft report late last, prior to Memorial Day weekend, we put out a draft report. The applicant responded with responses to a bunch of the questions that I raised. I reviewed that and made edits to my report yesterday in accordance with the response that I had received. And I believe I forwarded, I know I forwarded Ed's email to you, Elena. So you have received the information upon which I revised my report. There's no bad faith here. There's no nefarious conspiracy. It is simply just what happened in the process of the proceeding. I asked questions, they answered my questions, I changed my report as a result of those questions and those answers.
Can I just pick up? Nope. I just pick up, if you look at my response dated May 30th, went to everybody, including Mr. Lawton. That came to you, if not everybody has seen that, but
I can vouch for you in 100% in this regard. The public doesn't see the back and forth, but you have to trust that both the board and me as the chair are going to make sure that things are done properly. So I hope you can have that trust and continue to have that trust.
thank you.
This was a situation where the opposite is true than what was said here. I don't mean to say anything bad about her, but it's not true what she said. Michael was hired to do something important. He understood how important it was. He understood, and he could have just given us the opinion that he thought we might have wanted to hear. But instead, he independently wanted to make sure that the report was as accurate as could be, holding not necessarily AT&T's feet to the fire, but saying to them, you know, you may not know it, but there's some information missing, and I need that in order to give the full report that's going to help everybody understand what's going on. So everything that was done in that process was done at the highest level of integrity, at the highest level of good faith. And I want you to know that I oversaw it and I saw no problems with it. The board witnessed the emails were out there to everybody, including Alana, who saw everything. So while I don't like to comment on what people say, there's really nothing, there's no basis for that comment. The comment of the person behind it. There's no basis for it. It's a personal basis, which I appreciate. There's no factual or integral basis to that comment with respect to our deciding what to do and the integrity of this process going forward. So I want the public who's listening to know that we take this very seriously, and people can say what they want, but there's no truth to what she said. Thank you very much. All right, go ahead. I said it for you?
Yeah, you basically covered all of it. I mean, on that first point. And I want the rest of the board to know, I'm guessing you already do. I've never met Mr. Lawton before. The first time I ever met him was on a phone call with Peter. I have never spoken to him other than on a phone call with Peter or David. I do know David Maxon, and I let Peter and David know this. I only know Peter Maxon because I've sued him. He has been on the other side of cases. He is not an industry proponent. He represents municipalities. You can ask him about Franklin. You can ask him about Randolph. So please tell David I'm standing up for him tonight, even though I was probably the first lawyer that ever sued him when Broadcast Signal Labs started defending communities. So I want all of you to know that. And Michael, I want David to know that. Okay. A few things. So somebody quoted case law and talked about your right to insist that we provide drop call coverage. That actually is in case law in Massachusetts, it's Second Circuit. I just want everybody to be clear. That is not the law that is applicable to this board. That's number one. Number two, we are not picking and choosing which houses we would rather have the tower fall on. This tower is not within the fall zone of any house or structure. It is not within the fall zone of a house or a structure near the fairgrounds if we posed it there. It is hundreds and hundreds of feet away from any home. If it fell, and we discussed this at this very first meeting, it would fall over the road about 15 or 20 feet. And I think we discussed at the first meeting, if we go back to the notes on that, I don't think it even gets to the other side of the road. And we talked about the slope and the way, if you recall, we talked about Pythagorean theorem and how far it would be and how far over the road. We are not picking and choosing any neighbors over any other neighborhood. We looked at screening, we looked at trees, and we looked at an allowable zone and a preference over seeking a dimensional variance versus a use variance. You heard conjecture that hundreds and hundreds of towers have fallen. There was not one piece of evidence presented in this forum that a monopole tower with a hinge point has failed. You heard our expert tonight respond when I asked, did I ask you if any have? And his answer was, yes, I asked him. And I asked him, was his answer no? And the answer was no. He also verified that we asked Valmont, the tower designer, the same question. You heard somebody say, they looked on Wikipedia and 6 towers have fallen, the last one in the 1980s, and they talked about guide towers and lattice towers. The whole reason we're building a monopole is because they're safer. We have no evidence of monopoles failing. We have no evidence of monopole hinge points failing. That's why we've designed this as a monopole. We heard somebody say they switched from AT&T to T-Mobile because they couldn't get coverage in their home. That's part of the reason. We heard somebody in favor saying they can't get coverage in their homes. We're not tax exempt, we pay taxes. Not only will they pay taxes on the real estate, they'll pay taxes on the property installed on the real estate. The variance standard in Massachusetts does not require somebody to prove a financial hardship. It is any hardship. And First Circuit and the Massachusetts courts have held that gaps in coverage are a basis for that hardship. It's got nothing to do with a financial hardship. Somebody on Zoom mentioned least intrusive. And while I'm not 100% sure that that's the standard in the First Circuit, it is also our belief that this site is the least intrusive. Again, we could try and come back and seek a variance to put this tower on a residential property. We would need a use variance. It would be more visible. It wouldn't be screened. And it would be where your bylaw doesn't permit it. We do believe that it's the least intrusive. So while I appreciate the community and the concerns, half of the people that spoke don't live in the community and the concerns, but I do give credence to the people that live in Greenfield and will have to look at that tower and be neighbors and be abutters. I don't believe that anything anyone said from either Greenfield or the surrounding communities was anything but anecdotal. There is no actual factual evidence that, again, the comment about hundreds of towers have failed, and then the comments about guide and lattice towers. There's no evidence anywhere. And again, you've asked me, do we have evidence that monopole towers haven't fallen? And the answer is we don't. We just don't have any evidence that any have. They haven't failed. They don't fall. That's why everyone's building them now. So I'm happy to answer any other questions the board has. I honestly believe that if you read the memo, if you look at the materials you've submitted, if you consult and review the reports from the peer review on the biggest issues, which are the collapsibility of the pole on itself and the need for coverage and filling coverage gaps, and trying to do so in a means with best comports with your bylaw, I believe you could take everything else and throw it in the trash barrel and read the two expert reports. And I think if you read the two expert reports and take them on their face for what they are, this application comports with your bylaw. If not the exact and precise terms and conditions of your bylaw, the intent of your bylaw and the purposes of your bylaw. It's one pole, it's co-locatable, it is green to the greatest extent possible, and it is in a district where you prefer to have poles and communication located. Thank you, everybody. Like the past 6 months, I truly, I get back to what I said at the beginning. I appreciate your time, your energy, your questions, your interests, your concerns, and the truthful dialogue that I have had personally with everybody on this board. I thank you.
Thank you. And I'd also say on behalf of AT&T, my same comments. The
Free
questions-
phones?
What's that?
Free phones?
I don't get a free phone.
We can't say that.
We do appreciate the questions. We appreciate the back and forth, and we know it's not easy, and it's, you know, no good deed goes unpunished, so this is just left with you now, but we do appreciate the comments, the questions, and the transparency. With that, thank you all.
Thank you both. Now, I want to recognize Ilana has done an excellent job of representing commercials. I really have given the concerned citizens and you all the chances in the world to speak, and we've heard your excellent arguments about why we shouldn't do this. Your hand has been up. I don't want to ignore it. If I'm going to let you speak one last time, I'd like it not just to be leaving us with a kernel of something that you think is important and not a long explanation or rebuttal of a rebuttal of a rebuttal. Will you agree to those terms? I will let you speak.
Yes,
Okay, go ahead.
thank you for the opportunity. I simply am here to say that it feels really disrespectful and incredibly frustrating that Dr. Chamberlain, who is world renowned, who has worked for the government, who is an expert in this field, who has engineering solutions that can guide the ZBA, is not being allowed to speak one final time. He has donated his time. He donates his time to municipalities around the country and travels the world speaking on these issues. I know there was a misunderstanding about his background today. We had shared a very extensive bio.
This is not a kernel. This is not a kernel. I don't mean to interrupt you. I hear what you're saying. You think we've been disrespectful to Dr. Chamberlain.
I urge you to allow him to speak one final time. That's all I'm going to
I hear what you're saying, and here's my response. Dr. Chamberlain sent us a report. He had a chance to speak. We gave him a chance to speak tonight. I believe we've given Dr. Chamberlain a lot of time, and Dr. Chamberlain, I know you're still there. We truly appreciate the information that he has given us. But please, yeah, you're just giving me a thumbs up. Thank you. But it's within my discretion. It's within the board's discretion to end it when we so choose. I did give you the last chance to speak. If you want to say something yourself, but if you're going to admonish us, then I'm going to say good night. So please mute, and that's that.
I don't feel I'm admonishing the ZBA.
Well, I do, and so we're the ones who control the process, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Been a long night.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have other business to do.
Okay, do you have to vote to close this meeting?
Yeah, we have to close it here, right?
Okay.
Would you? Is that the other business we're going to do? Or is there other?
There's a little bit of other business.
David,
Can I hear a motion when it picks up? We vote first. It's an easy vote. Okay. Unless you have need a motion to close the hearing on the variance.
I'll make a motion to close the
Hearing and public discussion on the
Public
variance
discussion on the
application.
variance for this application.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record show is unanimous. Motion to close the variance hearing, if that's the next.
I think you just did the variance.
Yep.
The variance, now it's a special permit.
All right, a special permit, thank you.
I make a motion to close
You're
the
gonna be my
hearing and
chair,
public
you're gonna be
portion,
my sidekick.
public comment portion in regards to the special permit request for Verde Wireless on this application.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 10-minute break, 5-minute break, everyone, tea break, whatever.
Even two.
2-minute break. Eat?
Yeah, Wednesday, the 18th at 6:30.
Correct. Here.
Yeah.
Here, right, Eric?
Yes.
Here on the 18th.
Eric, you couldn't deliver the fire station for us?
They might have that area.
There's a more comfortable. Don't bring it up. It's better here.
No, who it is? Right on the 18th.
People need to, but they can't do that.
Thank you all.
Ed, we'll see you on the 18th.
Drive up.
Me too.
You are driving. Almost.
Well, I'll see you next week.
By the time-
Safe travels.
Up here, that's on the 18th.
6:30?
Nobody ever has.
Before the 12th, so.
And so this is on the 18th, still our regular meeting on the 12th.
Thank you so much.
It's by, July, oh, this is request July, August.
Oh, I've got every intention of.
We're still recording, just so you know.
I'm ready. Let's go. Okay, back in session. Is it on?
Yes.
Thank you. Back in session at whatever time it is.
10:08.
Thank you. So aromatic case is in trial. We all, so you don't know this case, but just. There was a yeah, you keep getting, there was a meeting, a couple of weeks ago where the court gave aromatic side 60 days to complete what's called discovery, ask questions. So they sent to us interrogatories. Interrogatories are written questions and production of documents. And Eric and I met with Attorney Quinn and we went over everything. And it's all been sent to Attorney Quinn to decide how he's going to deal with it. But there was one thing that I need your approval on. During the case, Attorney Quinn provided us with a memo that was a confidential legal memo. And in essence, we incorporated that memo into our decision. So it really wasn't that private because we kind of alluded to it and talked about it. So I'm recommending that we allow that memo to go to the other side, even though it's confidential, because it really lays out our case very clearly and it would be to our benefit. There's nothing in there that I feel like is anything that they shouldn't know. It's actually just the opposite. So can I have a motion? Any questions about that? Can I have a motion to allow that memo to be released to, that Attorney Quinn can make a decision if he wishes to release the memo, and we're waiving our confidentiality.
Make the motion to just what you said.
Okay. Second? Again, discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let the record show it's unanimous. We have 3 minutes, not 3 minutes to go, but 3 minutes to approve. I'm going to take them one at a time because that's the method that I use. Can we make a motion to approve? Has everyone received and read the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, bunch of liars. I know you've all received them.
Everything that came to me up until yesterday. I'm doing homework.
All right, so I want a motion to approve the minutes of April 17th, 2025.
Make the motion to approve the minutes of April.
Second,
I will second.
any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record show it's unanimous. Motion to approve the minutes of May 8th, 2025.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of May 8th, 2025.
I will second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The record shows unanimous. Finally, to approve the minutes of May 27th, 2025.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of May 27th, 2025.
I will second that. I just wasn't sure you wanted to jump in.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Let the record show it's unanimous. Now I can hear a motion to adjourn.
Make one motion meeting be adjourned.
I won't second that.
No seconds, you can't do it.
Second it.
No seconds. Second, any discussion? First time.
No.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
I changed my mind.
Thank you, everybody. Good meeting.
And I email it forward.
At 9 o'clock.
Yes.